hang on. That's all you have to do, hang on.
Hello, everybody. And we're going to listen to Stacey Seabrook, but the image you're looking at is a little something Paul came up with recently, and I'll explain more about that later.
And Papa Avery, I said this once for you, just letting you know the world can see what they have put you through, not that we could ever fathom or try to imagine the depth of your pain. But the case was a sham, the trial was a scam, the DA's a legal stain. I said, Mama and Papa Avery, we stand with you, no matter what the state says. Oh, their lies we see through, because the blood, it was a planet, the car was a planet, Sam William Henry 582. The bones they were planted, the bullet, yeah, planted, the key in the bedroom too. I said, Mama and Papa Avery, we send our love to you, just letting you know we can see what they did and continue to do. Oh, Mama and Papa Avery, said this once for you, just letting you know the world can see what they have put you through.
Gotta love Stacey Seabrook. So, to get into what you're looking at a little bit here, one of my guests here today, the Mad Scotsman, Mr. Capaldi, he likes to have a little bit of fun with jib jab. So I figured since tis the season to be jolly, I took one of the little clips that from his little video with him and Mark and I, and that's what we're looking at here. So that's why you guys are seeing that. Now I will turn my camera back on. I just gotta get my mouse working here. This is not working. All right. I can't turn it off. Thank you, Hangouts.
You just have to push end screen share.
I know, I'm trying to. I'm trying to get the stop, but it keeps going underneath that so that I can't get to the stop button. Oh my gosh. What a pain. Can Oh my God.
Erekose of the elf.
I know, right? Okay. That's toggling through. Okay. Oh my gosh. Bam. There we go. Hello, everybody. How you doing? All right. Sorry about that, but hey, gotta love Stacey Seabrook, and actually, I think for the international support show, probably a pretty good choice of songs, really talking about how everybody can feel for them and what they've been through. So, obviously, always like to play Stacey Seabrook because he's a very talented guy over there. So, And so like I said, we're here today to talk about international supporters. So sorry about the wait. Everybody had kind of a numerous thing snowball there. Had trouble getting Mark Hodnott in, so he's not here today. He may end up joining maybe at some point during the talk here. But if not, I'm wearing my Australia jersey here, so that he's here with us in spirit at least, right? So
I've got my thing on the Barrier Reef for Australia as well. So, and
we have Karen Gainey here from Australia also. We have Marissa Slusarczyk from Canada. And of course, we have the Mad Scotsman, Mr. Capaldi. And I may have butchered her name. She's probably going to correct me in a second. But we have Mr. Capaldi, the Mad Scotsman from Scotland.
Good evening, dude.
Hi, Marissa. Did I say that right, Marissa?
We say Slazarczyk, but it's
Slazarczyk.
Polish, so you're probably more right than we are.
Oh, okay. Okay, well then there we go. No harm, no foul. Okay.
Hey, once he's had a few beers, he can speak Polish as good as anyone.
Audio is way off. Uh-oh. Okay.
What do you mean, Phoebe?
Somebody is saying that the audio is way off.
Travis says, Mad Scotsman, I had a really good Highland single malt in your honor last night.
You should have more than just the one.
Phoebe said the audio's fixed.
It's fixed now? Okay, great. Awesome. Okay.
How did you fix it?
I don't know. All I did was unmute. All I did was unmute my YouTube and listen to it for a second, and I guess I must have intimidated it.
You gave it the look.
Yeah, totally. So, obviously here talking about international supporters today, and having a little chat with some, obviously. If there are some other international supporters out there in the chat that want to try and get in on it, let us know in the live chat. We'll have to put you through a screening process, and if you cut the muster, we'll get you in.
Okay, we already have a question.
Okay,
what do you guys think about brain fingerprinting?
Since my video this morning, it's going to have it on their brains.
Yeah.
I happen to think it's actually really good, really cool. I think I understand I feel like I understand what it's measuring and what it's doing, and it seems fairly sound process to me. But I think everybody might like to hear your guys' thoughts on it. Start with Marissa.
I think it's awesome, but I understand it because of MRI's technology and how that works with seeing how they trigger seizures and that sort of thing. It's easy to kind of see how an image could also be a trigger for the brain in that way, because it is used for medical purposes.
Right. And so, I mean, for me, it's this P300 murmur that they look for. To me, that is a very specific thing that happens when you access your memory. Now, I understand that they've spent 20 years refining it because they realized that there were other things that could possibly cause a P300 murmur to be triggered, even if they didn't have actual firsthand knowledge of something, even if they heard it described, that could sometimes trigger a P300 murmur. So they had to end up refining the test and a lot, and stuff like that. But I think they've got it down pretty solidly now. And I think the way that they used it to prove that Stephen had no real awareness of any of the things that happened at the back of the RAV4, which Stuart James has now proven, took place there according to the spatter, because the spatter didn't get there the way that the prosecution spatter experts said. It's impossible. And so by testing him with that scenario and realizing he had no knowledge of it because he had no P300 murmur when they showed Stephen that scenario, then we know Stephen has no knowledge of the way that Teresa really actually appears to have been killed. So you have any thoughts, Karen, on the brain fingerprinting?
I think, well, for me, I've got a science background, so I had a look I've got access to the Sydney Uni databases, so I had a look for research on it. And what bothered me a little bit was the only published peer review research has been done by Farwell, the guy who developed the technology. So I know it's used extensively by the CIA, FBI, and other agencies. And I know, of course, the alphabets share knowledge and resources and that sort of thing, but there doesn't seem to be any replicated studies other than Farwell's that have been published in peer-reviewed journals. And so whilst it does seem like very promising technology, there doesn't seem to be published replication studies. So at this point, I think it's still in the early stages of development, and we maybe view it a little bit cautiously, although very promising. I just wonder why it hasn't been replicated by somebody and those results published. For me, that's possibly a red flag, but it may have been replicated and those results just not published. So yeah, that was just curious. But I think one of the things to remember about this technology is it's really, the results you get are dependent on the input. So you've got to ask the right questions. So, because it's measuring, it can only measure a memory. So it can't discern, say, quality of the memory, just the presence of the memory. So you've got to ask a really high quality directed question. So it really needs somebody who knows the technology, which obviously Farwell does, but you've also got to be able to interpret the results within the right context. And so I think we've always got to kind of keep that in mind. And so I think the study he did, or the test he did on Stephen, was very well done and did have to be done very carefully because Stephen knew so much about the case, obviously, having done the trial. So it maybe has more potential in situations where there are a lot more opportunities for the range of questions that can be asked. I mean, this is just a really hard situation in which to apply it. So, yeah, I think there's certainly some possibilities, but I would say maybe don't over analyze some of the results. Maybe treat it a little bit cautiously, but yeah. Also keep in mind when you think about, I would like to fingerprint Kratz or Culhane or those sort of things, you do have to have a brain, brain fingerprints. So those guys, we may have to rule them out. That's all I'd say on that. Yep.
Dude, I would just point out that, well, two things really. I think if you're on the truther side, and the brain fingerprinting has shown that Stephen is completely innocent, knows nothing about the the attack on Teresa, then we're going to say it's a good thing. I suspect that people on the other side, they're going to say, well, how do we know how good quality it is? I noticed somebody had asked, has it been used before? Certainly, if you read the book about it, then you'll get a lot of information about the brain fingerprinting. There's a whole chapter devoted to it because it's such an important thing. And then you'll get a better idea of it. And just like as Karen was saying, that the problem is that because we're sort of more than 10 years down the line, it was difficult to come up with the exact sort of questions to ask. But no, I don't have any problem with brain fingerprinting. As I say, in John Farrak's book, he mentions the fact that this that it has been used in court. It is acceptable in court. Well, certainly in some states. Okie dokie. I see that the dude has managed to mute himself. So I think I'll just carry on and ask the questions then. And what he was going to ask was the you know, what brought you two ladies into the into the case originally? You know, what sort of made you interested in the plight of Steve and Brendan, Marissa?
It's just wrong. It just really irks me that you can see that these guys, like playing devil's advocate, even if they are guilty, they did not have a proper investigation. There was nobody else questioned as potential suspects. There was, I think it was 64 hours, and Stephen was considered a suspect for a homicide, and she was just considered missing. Why? That makes no sense to me, and it's just botched. It wasn't done right, and I would love it if they were guilty, just because then the right people are in jail. But we don't know that, and because of how they screwed it up.
Yes, we don't know that. We can't even, there's no way for us to be sure of that. What I am sure is I think that there was some shenanigans going on. That I am sure of.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So definitely. So now I'm back. Sorry. My mic got muted apparently one time when I was trying to text in live chat, and it somehow told Google Hangouts that I wanted my mic muted. So anyways, technical difficulties, learning experiences, you know. Anyways, somebody says, what is the number one question raised from each international supporter's respective country? I don't know. Seeing as I got 3 here, why don't you guys talk about what your biggest questions are with the Stephen or Brendan or Brendan cases?
Well, here being Canada, we have the young offenders protection, and basically that is anybody under the age of 18 who is charged with a crime cannot be named, they cannot be pictured. The maximum sentence, even for murder, is 10 years, and only 6 of that can be done in a jail or housing, and the rest is to be reintegrated into society as a functioning, responsible adult.
But under like a probation instead of, right? It's more like a probation.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, like it's monitored, and like it's to help them grow, because during those times, I think it's but before you're 21 or 22 years old, your frontal cortex is not developed, and that is the part of your brain that knows right from wrong and can differentiate and understand cause and effect and all of that.
Right.
So with the US, it just drives me insane to see these kids, like actual children, 14 years old, getting life in prison, because you are not the same person you were when you were 14. You're not the same person you were when you were 20.
Oh, even worse, I saw on Twitter. I'm sorry for just a second though. Even worse, I saw on Twitter a 14-year-old girl who was a sex slave in what's it called? The whole human trafficking thing, ended up killing her final owner to escape, and she's now going to get life in prison for trying to escape the horrific life she was in. And it's like,
she
do we have any rhyme or reason here anymore? Is there? I mean, has
she saved herself? She saved a whole bunch of other women, and she is going to jail for it.
Sanity has just left the building. Goodbye, guys. I'm out. I just don't get it. 14-year-old who tried to free herself from captivity is going to be now in captivity for the rest of her life. But at least if those other girls that are going to be, or those other kids or whatever that are going to be free now, that didn't have to kill the captor to get their freedom, hey, if that's the trade-off, then I guess I'll have to be happy with that. But I'm not happy with it. I do not think a 14-year-old should be going to doing life in prison for saving her and the lives of other kids that were in a very horrible situation.
When I escaped what I consider captivity and what the law considered captivity, it had been 5 years, and the judge told me in the hallway outside of the courtroom, you should have killed him. It would have been easier.
Didn't work out easier for this girl who was 14. I mean,
no.
14. I mean, she's lucky she was able to get the upper hand and kill the guy to get her freedom, and then only to have the fuzz come in and go, "Sorry, we're a bunch of idiots. You're going to jail for life." But obviously, whoever that guy was had pull, had money, had power, and that's probably why this happened, right? So definitely unfair. Let's see. Anybody else got a question here? Let's see. Travis is saying expert witness testimony is treated very differently in the UK. It is quite interesting. Travis is going to school us on European law now too. Let's see. I am not aware. Travis is saying about brain fingerprinting. I am not aware of any court ruling that brain fingerprinting evidence is acceptable for a jury to consider. However, there is always a first time, and that is what KZ is trying to work on. She actually did show an instance in that thing in the document that I showed in the video earlier today, where it had been used in one court case. I can't remember. Was it Harrington?
Harrington.
Right? Yeah, Harrington.
Omaha, in Iowa.
Right.
And we have to remember too that with something like brain fingerprinting, it was only about 80 years ago that fingerprinting was considered junk science and not acceptable. DNA was not even, like, one of the first cases it was really used in was the OJ case. And now it's something that we all rely on and depend on. So it's just a matter of a couple of years, and suddenly brain fingerprinting is going to be the new way to do an interrogation. Like, it's not even going to be an interrogation. It's going to be like, sit down, look at these pictures. Oh, you're guilty.
Or maybe, I mean, we're now questioning fingerprinting because we're finding that they're not actually as unique as we once thought. Because they've found instances where two different unrelated people have enough elements of fingerprints in common. That was, I forget the instance, but someone was wrongly convicted based on fingerprints. So the fingerprints used to be a gold standard, but now that's even coming into question. So, excuse me, forensic science is constantly evolving, and I think that's one of the good things of Buting and Strang, or I'm not sure if it's both of them involved in this new enterprise of getting more science into forensics, because a lot of these kind of outdated, or not that fingerprints is outdated, but we need to constantly relook at the science behind a lot of these things, and newer things coming in and saying, well, put them to the test and see how rigorous this is. Does it hold up? Do we want to keep this? Do we want to throw this out?
I think that's
analysis is, a good example of something that should have gone years ago.
Yeah, I think that's going to. I'm sorry. I was thinking that's probably going to be a big part of what, like, Jerry and Dean's new organization is probably going to be trying to do. CIFS is to try to bring order to the forensic sciences and decide what makes science junk science and whatnot. Sometimes it's just about the way it's collected. It just has to be collected properly and it's fine. But sometimes some science gets introduced that wasn't collected properly. And so there's so many things to address with any piece of evidence and it's the veracity of that piece of evidence that has to get, just a lot of things that have to get dealt with. So go ahead, Marissa. So, I mean, obviously that's something like that organization is obviously going to be trying to set a standard for moving forward. I hope if their organization CIFS catches on, which I hope it does. But sorry, go ahead. Or Paul.
Yeah, sorry. What I think particularly has struck me, maybe not to begin with, but then, the first thing I did after watching Making a Murderer was get in touch with Sheriff Herman. I think, well, I've written some stuff down. I'll just read what I've put down, And that is this: if item FL, right, if it simply grazed Teresa, right, ricocheted off the concrete floor, then ricocheted off a wooden wall, bounced off some lubricant, and then came to rest under a compressor, some people would have us believe that actually happened, and it could have been that happened. But there's also a chance that isn't the way it happened. And if the RAF key was cleverly hidden, so cleverly hidden that only the crackerjack detectives Lenk and Colburn were skilled enough to find it after 6 previous searches, there's also a chance that it wasn't, right? And if the bonnet catch of Teresa's RAV4 had a surface like grade 40 sandpaper, resulting in Steve depositing 90 times more DNA than anyone else would do on a normal bonnet, well, there's also a chance that isn't the case, yeah? And if Teresa's body was burnt in an open fire with so much heat that 60% of her body and nearly all her teeth evaporated, there's also a chance that it didn't. Do you know what I mean? There's, you know, you've got these two sides, and you know, if Colburn was not looking at Teresa's car when he phoned it in Sam William Henry 852, there's a chance that he was. You know, if it is possible that Pam Sturm was led to the RAV4 by God, then there's a chance that he couldn't be bothered to do that. You know, if there's a chance that Stephen Brendan did a miraculous cleaning job, then there's also a chance that Teresa was never in the bedroom in the first place. Now, what really annoys me is this, that Ken Kratz secured the convictions of Stephen Brendan. And he's been quoted as saying that he didn't just have to prove it beyond reasonable doubt, but he claims that he proved that they were guilty beyond all doubt. Mm-hmm. And that's clearly not what happened. Millions can see that, you know.
Right.
Had there been no doubt about the convictions, there would never have been a making a murderer. But there's a lot of doubt about what was presented at trial, sufficient doubt about Stephen Brendan being guilty. Ken Kratz and his elite team of investigators and prosecutors are responsible for this doubt. They are the reason that the Teresa Holbach family is not enjoying closure.
Yeah, exactly.
That is what really bugs me about this. They accused, you know, it's like Dave Bergottis said, you know, they accuse us of standing on our graves and asking questions.
Mm-hmm.
And it's them that have brought on this doubt. Ken Kratz never proved it beyond reasonable doubt.
If they had done it right, we wouldn't have questions to be standing on that grave asking.
Exactly.
If they had done their job better, or at least we would have had a lot fewer, and we'd be done by now.
Yeah.
You know. But It's not the case. There's so many questions. They keep popping up. More and more crap pops up every day, every week, every month. More and more still surfaces. It continues to surface. It's just like, that doesn't happen by accident.
I remember an email I got from Mike Griesbach, and I asked him about, you know, obviously stuff like the insurance and all that kind of stuff. And I said that you know, interesting that Zellner is going to be filing a motion. That was back in August of 2016, you know. Mm-hmm. And his words were along the lines of, you know, yes, the filmmakers did a great job, and that, you know, a testimony to their work. It could just be that you know, we wait to see what Zellner has. It could be that she has nothing at all, and that might have been true back then. What we've discovered is that she's gone out and she's really gone to town on what these clowns in Manitowoc thought they could get away with.
Yeah, absolutely. Did you have something else you wanted to add, Karen? Sorry. To your answer or to your segment?
Yeah, I was just going to comment before. Oops, what's happened? On the this, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yep. On the situation in Australia, because we're literally an island. We don't hear any news reports, not that I've heard anyway, on the. So I guess my internet.
Nope. Now you're back. So.
I'm back? Yeah. Sorry, I'm having internet issues at the moment.
It's coming through now.
Can you hear me at least?
Yes, we can hear you and see you, actually.
Okay, I'll just keep talking. So if you're not already plugged into the case, watching the drama on Netflix, or following someone on YouTube, you just wouldn't keep up to date because there's nothing on in the media. So I actually fell into this purely by accident because I'd seen the first season, when it kind of came out on Netflix, and then was keen for the second season when I just saw that it was coming soon. But basically came across Erekose's channel on YouTube purely by accident, because I think it came up as a recommended thing. If you like something else, you'll like this, because I follow true crime stuff. My partner is overseas at the moment until April, and I'm just really bored and lonely. So I'm just, watching a lot of YouTube at the moment. And because I just seen season 2, decided to get into this. And because of, I saw so much of much more of the injustice from season 2, got really, really much more engaged in the story. And your channel is one of the better ones I've seen. And you told much more of the story. And the background really hooked me in. But for Australia, I have noticed, excuse me, I'm and part of a Facebook online group for skeptics. And unfortunately, what I am seeing in Australia that I wonder if is that prevalent elsewhere are so-called skeptics, I think, just trying to be skeptical and putting down the series just because it's in a documentary, and they're not really giving it the time of day. If they just saw it, I think, as a case that just came along, they would treat it differently. But purely because it's a documentary, they're going, oh, they're trying to pull at our heartstrings and make it emotional and all of this. And so, he must be guilty, or they're trying to make it a conspiracy and this and that. And they're not being, ironically, they're not really being true skeptics. And I can't even look at you, Paul. I can't look at you. I'm going to start. I'm not looking.
Yeah. Put a piece of tape over the screen right there.
It happened last time. And so that's really frustrating me, because they're not actually being proper skeptics. Some postings and YouTube not rants, but reviews from so-called skeptics who think that they're being critical and analytical, but really they're just being
stubborn, obstinate,
petty. And then really got the documentary, if they've even watched it at all. And I think that's really disappointing, because it's easy to write it off and go, yeah, it's just a documentary, it's just this, it's just that, without actually looking into it a lot more deeply. And and that's,
looks like Mike
wonder,
agrees with you. He's from Australia, apparently. So
so I kind of wonder sometimes if the fact that it did get made into such a big documentary and it's become so popular, is the longer it goes on, is that going to do more damage to their case? And that sometimes bothers me. I mean, can you get more damage than there's already been done? Is that impossible? But we saw this with a case of a convicted drug smuggler in Australia, Chappelle Corby, if anyone knows that story, where she was caught with some pot in a boogie board, and she got, in Thailand and in Bali, and got what they think was an extra long sentence because the media got involved. And usually, if the media is not involved and all of that, the sentence is usually a lot shorter. So I just keep thinking back to that situation where, is Stephen going to get punished in a way, and Brendan, because of all of this extra pressure from people, rather than it helping? And I mean, who knows?
Right. Absolutely.
Yeah, you know what I mean? It can go both ways.
I have a question. It goes back a long time.
Okay.
You did a video on this probably 2 years ago now, and it was the bullet hole on the back of the RAV, and then that little sticker that's on the window,
Yeah.
and then both of those not being there in the photos that weren't taken on Avery property.
Right. As far as the writing that isn't there at the crime lab, that could be because of the lighting at the crime lab that we're not being able to see that. That's what I think could be the explanation on that writing on the window. However, whatever that is on that rear driver's side column that goes on, basically it's on the side corner there that goes up by the windows there, that I don't know what that is, that anomaly on there. And I call that video the anomaly on the back of the RAV4, basically because that's what it is to me. And then when you look around, when you see that spot later, it looks like, and Joseph Burns, who's really good with editing pictures and stuff like that, and that sort of thing. He's done a couple videos about photoshopping, possibly in some of the photos that were used at trial. But he even says it looks like somebody might have taken the copy marker and sampled the paint on the RAV4 and then made a little X over that spot where there's like this little speck on the picture at Avery Salvage, but that speck is like gone at the crime lab. So yeah, that was one thing, a video I'd done about. And yes, Joe Burns and I had determined it could be possible they photoshopped that speck out of the crime lab.
So with a speck like that, do you think that something like that could be a reason that they're denying Zellner the right to actually see the RAV?
That could be very well. Yeah.
Okay.
Definitely. I mean, it looks like it's an arrow hole, which gets people talking, because there's a lot of people out there right now that are very excited about the bow hunting skills of Bobby and the possibility of him using a bow. And so the fact that hole looks like it could be an arrow hole gets those people kind of rumbling. So,
Yeah. Like, it's an interesting thing because there are so many like little anomalies, and that to me again goes back to the entire case. It's the totality of it all. If it was just a weird dent that was in the different light, or just a different like a typo or whatever, but it's so many typos, it's so many anomalies. That's what really gets my brain going.
Mm-hmm. That's what the lab guy said when KZ gave him the stuff to analyze the reports. He was like, normally you'd see a couple of anomalies, but with this case, just the sheer number of anomalies is a red flag. And that was, I think, and then the sheer number of groups of anomalies is, a red flag. And I don't know how the guilters or the people that think he's guilty can't see that these clusters are just so, they're not just red flags, they're just so improbable, they're just so completely improbable that they don't just happen. I mean, they might happen in one in a gazillion times. And
yeah, it's not likely, not probable.
The law of large numbers says, in an infinite universe, anything is possible.
Yeah. Let me get my infinity probability generator, infinite probability generator. I love Douglas Adams.
It's actually, I don't know if you guys listened to Laura's live the other night when I was talking, but I actually said to Falcon, like, sure, the key could have fallen like that, but it's not we can't replicate it. But we've all done something stupid where you're like, I couldn't do that again if I tried, and you just can't. So.
Yeah, it might,
but it's not just then I went on and I said it's not just the key though. It's it's all of it together.
When it moves across,
if it was just the key was randomly found on the 8th search, then it would be like, oh, they're just dumbasses who missed a key. But
Right?
But it's not the key.
The totality of the circumstances, as Travis likes to put it, right?
Exactly.
Well, just a few miles from here is Scott's View, and of course, Sir Walter Scott in his novel The Marmion, he says, "Oh, what tangled webs we weave when first we practice to deceive."
Indeed.
Such a big head.
Are you deceiving us in any way there, Paul? All right.
I would like to say that I do not believe wigs are original to the UK.
T1 says, with so many holes in this case, it's very challenging not to fall into them. One of them will lead irrefutable evidence of SA and BD innocence, in my opinion. Irrefutable, no question marks. So T1's pretty convinced that eventually that proof is going to emerge. Oh, he's switching wigs. We're seeing Captain Crunch again. He's got to be switching wigs.
And
Next
I
he's gonna
actually
come back.
left
He's going to come back with a
comment
Sebastian Bach wig. Watch.
No.
That's just his real hair. I left a comment on your video yesterday, I think, or today. I don't know. There's so many videos. And I was talking about the hell was I talking about? My brain broke. Someone else talk.
Okay. So depending on how high, so we got Scrag saying, depending on how high the corruption goes, Zellner's greatness may be denied a crack at the case in court. But she'll keep knocking on the door until they let her in, dude. She'll be the annoying, visitor that will just continue to knock and knock and knock and knock and knock, or wait there until you come home. Right? That's what she's going to be like. She's going to be that annoying at the district court until they finally let her in. So, I mean, for me, it's not a matter of if, it's a matter of when. How long are they going to be able to just tolerate her continually knocking at the door, continually embarrassing them with the evidence that she's coming up with, and continually going on and on and on until they break, just like they did to Brendan. You know?
Okay, I found my comment.
Go ahead.
I was talking about, it was on your Villegas video yesterday.
Oh yes.
And I had written that I like how in the UK that they say not proven guilty, and how I feel that the reasonable doubt needs to be redefined in the US because the English language has just changed, and people don't seem to comprehend that beyond a reasonable doubt actually means if you have a doubt, you cannot convict. Where in the UK, you have that not proven guilty. It leaves, or it allows for people to actually say, I think they did it, but they didn't prove it.
It allows a way around double jeopardy. It allows you to kind of put a pin in it and say, look, we couldn't prove it, but we're not done here yet, basically.
But I think for the jury, it allows the jury to actually be able to say, I think he did it, but they didn't give me enough information to prove it. So it's not saying he didn't do it. It's just saying, I'm not throwing him in jail because.
Right. It's basically leaving it open, saying, look, if more proof emerges that makes this person look guilty, we're on board. But right now, we're like, we don't want to rob somebody of their freedom on such little evidence, basically.
Exactly. And it's really interesting because essentially it means the same thing. It's just that we have the language used is so it kind of tricks you.
Mm-hmm.
I feel like
and that.
Sorry, go ahead, Karen.
Go ahead, Karen.
I think the burden isn't on. You start off with the idea of you're coming in with a concept of you're innocent until proven guilty. And the burden is on the prosecution to prove you're guilty. It's the flip to be the other way around. It's the defense have to prove you're innocent beyond a reasonable doubt, and it shouldn't be like that.
It's somehow gotten that way. Yeah,
it's gotten that way because I think someone pointed out, or one of your videos pointed out, that there's a social injustice in all of that, because the state has infinite resources at their disposal, and therefore the rich are the only ones who can afford to mount an equitable defense. And that's not fair. And so therefore you get an unequitable, you know.
I'm starting to think that every profile court case should have an independent arbitrator who determines whether or not, you know, who gets to determine how much money can be spent by either side on experts or testing, and that it should put a cap on it, because obviously not every defendant can come up with infinite resources, and so there should be a cap on what the state is allowed to do. And I think that what should be allowed should be up to an independent arbitrator, not the judge. An independent arbitrator, somebody with, you know, financial savvy and some understanding of the criminal justice system, who would then determine what testing is actually called for and how much, you know, each side should be allowed to spend on that testing, so that it gets things into brings things into a more level playing field, because it is absolutely a losing game the way it is now, because literally any county, any city or state or whatever, they can mount infinite resources to do whatever they want, and not everybody that gets on trial has that, and so the equity needs to be there, and it needs to be considered. So that's something I think probably needs to happen. So,
and one of the things that breaks my heart is I've seen in different docos, even just the bond system is there can be bond of $1,000 for some people, and that's more than people have in the bank. And they might sit in, you know, in jail or Rikers Island or whatever it is for 18 months, 24 months before they even get a court date. And some of these are juveniles, and they're facing unbearable conditions, and they might be completely innocent, but they can't even get out on bond. On bail, sorry. On bail to come home, because they can't afford $1,000. Or they might be forced to use the bond system at 20% interest or something like that. And it's just that social injustice. We just don't see that here. Certainly not to my knowledge, and that just absolutely freaks me out. That is allowed to go on, and of course that unfairly seems to affect minority groups, and of course, you know, with the economic collapse, it sort of affects everybody now.
But the housing market's getting ridiculous. You know, it's just costing way too much to be able to have somewhere to live. I mean, things are just running out of control right now. And I'm just getting sick of people in power, like Wisconsin with the Avery case, but it's happening everywhere, of people just like, no, there's no problem. There's nothing to see here. Nothing to see here. You know, it's like, no, wait, things are running out of control slowly here. You know, people can't afford on minimum wage to pay for a 1-bedroom apartment. That's a problem.
Can I just take you back to we were talking about you know, the sort of biggest issues, the things that we particularly didn't like, and it was something that Ken Kratz said in his summing up, that reasonable doubt is for innocent people. And I thought that is one of the most ridiculous things I have ever heard. And why was he not pilloried by the press for something like that?
Yeah,
you know,
I agree.
That's what I want to know. Why is the press in Wisconsin, why are they so pally with Kratz? You know,
or why were they?
Exactly. I mean, I tell you what, when I went to Amsterdam, I actually printed off beforehand a sheet whereby you could ask a question. You know, you could ask a question of Jerry and David Rudolph. And funny enough, as we walked to the theatre, who got out of a taxi but Jerry Buting? You know. And he's oh, hi Paul, you know, hello and everything, you know. Oh, have you got some questions there? Well, they actually read out my question. Because I thought, well, what could I ask? What question could I ask of Dean and Jerry that applies to both cases? And my question was
Jerry and David, right?
Yeah, to Jerry and David, who is the most unethical DA, Jim Harden or Ken Kratz? And you know, actually, David Rudolph said, well, he thought that it was Jim Harding because of what he did in having the press come and look at the exhumation of the body of the girl's
the lady
mother.
in Germany, right?
Yeah,
right.
the girl. Yeah, and all that kind of stuff. But then Jerry said, no. Ken Kratz is definitely worse than Jim Harding, and I would have to agree with him. The things that Kratz has come out with, you know, I mean, as Jerry pointed out in the show, in the show, his Ken Kratz's sexting. I made a note of this. His you know, sending inappropriate text messages. That goes back to 1999.
Wait.
Yeah.
Does it? Oh, well,
Yeah.
we only found out about it in like 2009 when he started making his little run for Congress. I think somebody in Wisconsin didn't like the idea of him running for Congress, and they sabotaged him and leaked the information about his sexting scandal.
Well,
but that's what he was getting ready to do.
Mm.
So just interesting little things that kind of correlate with the time, you know, just for all of you to know. So anyway.
Also, can I just point out that some people were pointing out that, of course, it's only in Scotland that we have guilty and not proven. And it reminded me of something else that was said by Jerry, because it got onto the subject of in Holland, or the Netherlands, to give it its proper title. In the Netherlands, the guy hosting the show was actually a prosecutor. You know, was like one of the top prosecutors in Amsterdam, and there they have a system whereby people go in front of 3 judges. And it was Jerry that pointed out that, I think it was Jerry, or it might have been David, but it pointed out that the British are to blame for the fact that in America they now have trial by jury, because certainly in Britain at one time the king could just say to the judges, I want you to find this person guilty, and then we can get rid of him. Not many people have heard of this, but in Scotland back in the 1700s, I believe it was, there was an incident that's referred to as Jeddah Justice. Jeddah Justice, just down the road in Jedburgh. They caught these guys and accused them of sheep stealing.
Yes.
What they did was they hung the guys on the Thursday, and then on the following Tuesday, the judge came into town and they had the trial for them.
Yeah. Jeez.
That was Jeddah Justice. So apparently it's the British that are to blame for the fact that over there in America you have trial by juries. It's just that obviously one of the big problems about making a murder is the fact that we've got these 2 absurd decisions that Stephen is found guilty of murder but not guilty of mutilating a corpse. You'd like to think that surely judges wouldn't get that wrong, but then on the other hand, I'm thinking, well, if the en banc majority can be so split and so stupid in their summation of the case, you don't know what's going to be best, jury or judge.
Right. So let's see what's going on in chat here a little quick. Let's see.
There's actually, Travis wants to know from Paul.
Mm-hmm.
He says the parents of Amanda Duffy launched a major campaign to abolish the not proven option. He'd like to hear the Mad Scotsman's take on that. His words.
Amanda Duffy.
Yeah.
I can't remember that one. It's to be honest, I was interested in music and just music up until Making a Murderer came out. Then my daughter got interested in it, told me about it. I mean, I can't imagine that you know, even in the staircase, we've got Michael Peterson saying about the advantages of the, you know, guilty not proven. I suppose on one given case, you might say, "Oh, that would suit me. That suits me better," and maybe not so on another. But I can't imagine Scotland changing its verdicts. I see them as very good. You know, the rest of the world are looking at Scotland and say that's how it should be done. So
I agree. I mean,
specifics
that
of,
seems to be what a lot of people around the world admire about the Scottish legal system, is that particular, you know, part of it. So I think they got something there something to be proud of, I guess, is what I'm saying.
Well, yes, compared with the Jeddah justice of like 200 or 300 years ago, you know, we've advanced, you know, but Jeddah justice seems to be prevailing in certainly in Manitowoc.
Mm-hmm. Definitely. So what else? I mean, while you're there in Amsterdam, I know you didn't get to see Miss Georgina Stuhlen-Bose there, who's who runs the Dutch support group. Hold on just a second. I do have something to show everybody here in a second after Paul's done talking about Jerry and David, which is the support poster that was made by Georgina and her husband, the lovely Georgina Stuhlen-Bose. And but anyways, what else? I mean, I don't know. Do you want to? What else did Jerry talk about while he was there? Did he talk about CIFs at all?
Oh, just one second.
No.
Sorry. Go ahead.
Paul, Travis says it was in 1993, that case.
Oh, right.
So I don't know. I guess you were
Paul's
probably.
true crime interest is a little too recent. I don't think he's looked into it yet.
Yeah. So if you're interested in looking into that,
we're coaching him up, Travis. We're getting him there, buddy.
Okay, sorry for interrupting.
No worries.
Yeah, the couple of interesting things that Jerry said. One during the show is that he's actually got a case ongoing at the moment in which he is opposing Tom Fallon.
Oh, really?
Yeah, he's got something ongoing at the moment
cool.
where he's, Tom Fallon is still there. The other thing that he said that was interesting, of course, was the fact that when I spoke to him about, you know, about, for example, doing a chat with yourself, whereas David Rudolph was, let's, I'll have a, keep in touch and yes, if I can do something, that'll be great. Jerry was a bit sort of, I've got to be careful here because I'm gonna be ending up in as a witness in Steve's case. You know, obviously a witness to his and Dean's ineffective assistance of counsel, isn't he? You know, right. So he was. I suppose in a way I can quite respect the fact that, you know, he doesn't want to come on and say anything, because that's exactly what we're saying about Ken Kratz did wrong, isn't it? You know,
right?
And you know, talking to the media and talking to anybody and, you know, messing about like that. So we just want as far as
Jerry, when I do approach Jerry to come on, I'm going to ask him if he will come on and talk about CIFS. Mm-hmm. And I'm going to let him know that whether or not he talks about Stephen Avery and Brendan Dassey is completely up to him. It will be up to him to take the conversation in that direction. So that's one of the things I'm going to make clear when I do reach out to him this week. So I don't want him putting anything with Stephen and Brendan in jeopardy. That's for sure. So
absolutely.
But I would love to hear him talk about him and Dean's new nonprofit organization, Center for the Integrity of Forensic Sciences. I'm very, very eager to hear him expand on that.
That would be
I must admit, sorry, one of the things that was quite interesting was I was chatting with as I say, the host of the show, who was the this prosecutor I just said something that actually he was with some other people, and I said about the fact that they were talking about in America that one of the problems, and you actually touched on it, and that is that the system that they've got, they're happy with it, and both Dean and Jerry and David Rudolph, I can't remember quite what they said, but it was along the lines of, they've got that over there and they've got that in that other country, but it was like, well, it wouldn't really work with us, as if we're in America, that is, we're somehow unique, and in some ways, yes, America is unique, but there are things that you could take on board from other countries where other countries are getting it right, where you could take these on, and I don't want to sound as if I'm bashing Uncle Sam, but sometimes Americans are just sort of oh well, we're different, we're unique, yeah, that might work with you over there, but it wouldn't work here. They're just happy with the status quo, aren't they?
Yeah, but let me ask you this honestly.
Go on, then.
How open are the Scots to accepting advice from others? To be fair, right?
I don't quite know what you're getting at there. I don't quite know.
I'm sure you don't.
Now, this little debate could take a while, so I just want to interrupt and say I'm going to head off in about 10 minutes. So if there's anything anyone wants to ask about Australia,
Okay.
Now's
All right,
the
let's
time.
open it up in the chat then right now. If there is anybody that has questions geared towards our Australian supporter here, Karen Gainey, and anything that if you're interested in anything she might have insight on, please ask a question. She'll be here for 10 more minutes.
Actually, I do have a question.
Good for you, Paul. Go ahead, buddy.
It's a question about Australia. Okay.
Go ahead.
Nobody else is to prompt Erekose on this, okay? But Erekose is now his videos have been seen in 50 odd different countries, But I've serious doubts about his geographical skills. So I'm going to ask Erekose right here and now, and don't anybody answer for him. What is the capital of Australia?
Sydney.
No.
Or is it Melbourne?
No.
No.
Not either one of those? Okay.
No.
Well,
Keep going.
Queensland.
No.
That's a state.
Now I'm just throwing stuff out there.
I'm
not.
Dude, I've set you up.
I know where Australia is on a globe. I know about Sydney, and yeah, I know New Zealand's off the coast of it.
No, it's not Brisbane. It's not Brisbane. It's none of the places you would think it is. It's Canberra.
No.
Canberra.
You even said it properly. Say Canberra.
Yeah.
There's a lot of things Americans say that they pronounce incorrectly. Aluminum.
Paul likes to embarrass me.
I do not like to embarrass you. You like to embarrass yourself.
Oh, is that the case? All right.
Captain Crunch.
Oh, my Lord. Okay, so let's see if anybody's got some questions here.
Yeah.
So somebody's asking, is your court system very familiar with the American system, or is it very different? Is it done by judges or juries? So I guess somebody wants you to kind of talk about the differences of your system.
Well, our court system is based on the UK system because we're part of the Commonwealth. So it would be more similar to the UK system. We do have the jury system. But I've never been summoned for jury duty, so I've never been part of it. But I think it's quite similar to probably the American system, but more similar to the UK, where we have it's the structure. I think at the basic level is probably the defendant and the prosecutor and a jury, but our hierarchy is just different, where we have I haven't studied this, so I don't know the exact details, but like our highest court is called the Supreme Court of Australia. So the best movie to watch to understand our legal system is called The Castle. And there's a terrific ruling called Mabo. So, you know, it's all about the vibe, about Mabo, the vibe. So that kind of gives you a really good foundation in Australian legal precedent. But, you know, then we've kind of got federal courts and local courts, and different kinds of cases go to different kinds of courts. So kind of like local courts have, I guess, more domestic matters, and excuse me. I'm losing my voice. Yes, but we have barristers who are, and QCs, which are Queen's Counsel, and they wear the wigs and all of that sort of stuff, like you would see in if you watch any UK dramas. So there are those kind of differences where we're a little bit fancier at the higher levels. So, and you can't hire a barrister. You hire a lawyer and they hire a barrister, and they're really expensive, posh lawyers. So there are a few differences, but I think essentially at the lower levels, it's pretty much the same, but probably a little bit more casual.
Okay.
I would say,
cool.
Perhaps, maybe.
Okay, so somebody here, the question that has everybody's attention, not necessarily about Australia here. I was roaming the MAM vids on YouTube, as many do, and there was something I came across with a supposed witness who was in the SA trailer and said it smelled of bleach. Okay, so let me give my thoughts on this real quick. Everybody who's seen the pictures of Stephen Avery's trailer, okay, do you see any indication that bleach was used anywhere in that trailer? I don't. And if he was using bleach in the rug doctor cleaning up blood out of the carpet, we would see bleached carpet everywhere. So I don't believe that. So my whole thing on this is that I believe this bleach smell is just coming from witnesses, people, secondhand people who are trying to incriminate Stephen, in my opinion, because I see no evidence that bleach was used anywhere in that trailer ever. I mean, a lot of people commented when MEM first came out, how when they look at the pictures of the trailer, that they say they feel like they can see probably 2 or 3 years of debris and crud and crap on the floor and in the carpet and stuff. So it's I mean, if bleach was used in Stephen's trailer, where was it used?
The only thing I can think of with the bleach smell would be that because he had been in jail for so long, they bleach everything in jail, and he bleaches his laundry, but I don't know if he had a washer and dryer in the trailer or not. But I know when I bleach laundry in the morning and my son gets home from school in the afternoon, he comes in and he says, "It stinks clean in here."
Stinks clean.
He
So,
hates
I don't know,
the smell of bleach.
That's my thoughts on those accounts. Karen, before you have to go.
I don't like the smell of bleach. That's all I know about bleach. And Travis asked about cane toads. There are none really don't have them in New South Wales, but I saw heaps when I lived in Queensland, and a lot of people use them as golf balls and hit them with a golf stick, and that's
not cool.
Common thing.
Hitting what?
Cane toads, because they're a pest and they're about that big.
Oh.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Huh.
So, I don't know if Travis saw my answer. That was. That's
and then
all the Australian stuff. I know.
Back to bleach a little bit. People are asking about the bleach that was on Brendan's jeans. Was that Barb who just said that, or
I didn't think there was bleach on his jeans.
I remember something about it, but I don't know if it was a proven thing or if it was a rumor.
A couple of things I would like to point
Might
out
have got
is
it
that,
at school. I mean, do we know he either got it at home or he might have got it in science class at school or something like that? Like it was it bleach or just a chemical stain?
And again, it could have just been somebody did the laundry wrong. Like a lot of people put bleach in the laundry and ruin their clothes.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah, I think was it not Wendy Baldwin who, I think we have to take every single thing she says with a huge pinch of salt, because I don't think she's exactly honest in what she says.
Agreed.
Saying that she was amazed how tidy it was and everything. Well, we've seen the pictures of it. No, it's not tidy. It's a trailer. It's not tidy at all. It's interesting, isn't it, that some of the people that think that Stephen is guilty, they will quote the fact that there was a couple of tires burnt in the bonfire, and that was used as the accelerant that caused Teresa's body to evaporate. Well, the amount of tires that would have been necessary was going to be huge. There would have been a whole pile of the steel left over if he'd used the tires. The bleach on Brendan's jeans, the amount of blood we saw in the staircase, didn't we? The amount of blood that was everywhere. You don't just clean that up with a little bit of bleach. The little bit of bleach that was on Brendan's jeans, the reason why they picked up on that was because Brendan talked about cleaning up a red fluid, which of course is transmission oil. They'd use that to clean up the garage, but they hadn't used copious amounts of this bleach to completely remove any blood from the garage, because they did find not only blood of a deer, didn't they, and also Stephen Avery's DNA.
I don't know about Stevens, but blood of a deer, I believe. Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, you mean in Stevens' garage? Yes, they found some spots of Stevens' blood, some deer blood.
Yeah.
And
and
various grime all over the place, which somehow didn't get taken away with the bleach that he used to clean up Teresa's blood. It's amazing. He had this really, really special bleach that only cleaned up Teresa's DNA and left everything else perfectly intact. It's amazing.
Yeah.
Wasn't Wendy Baldwin the one that was, when they were going through the first time in the trailer, making fun of Stephen with the invite?
Yep. Saying we could take all these shoes and we could probably solve half of the petty crimes in Manitowoc and all that.
The shoes, we'll collect those. I mean, that was so off.
Yeah.
That was
clear prejudice.
And her and Jerry Pargle joined in the Mile High Club up above Manitowoc, having a fly over for 4 hours. What were they doing for 4 hours? They've only got 3 minutes to make the video. Again, in Zellner's, in John Farrak's book, he makes a very valid point that the reason why all that foliage was added to the top of the RAV4 was so that if they had have videoed it, they wouldn't have seen the RAV4 from the air.
Yeah, I suppose.
Anyway, I'm going to shoot through. Thank you for having me.
Oh, yes, it's been a pleasure having you, Karen.
Yeah, cheers, Karen.
Bye, Karen.
If I finish soon, I might come back if that's all right. I'll just
If we're still going, absolutely, you're welcome back.
I don't know how long it'll be. All right.
The night is young.
It's 12:30 here, so I got time.
Hey, hopefully if we go long enough, maybe Stacey can join us. Who knows?
Yeah, that'll be good. All right. Bye.
Alrighty, we'll see you, Karen. Do you need me to put you out, or are you able to end the call, or?
Just eject her. No.
I gotta figure out how to do that.
Go on her picture.
There she goes. She figured it out. All right. So now that Karen has went on here and moved off of the call, we're gonna go ahead and I'm gonna go ahead and show you guys another screen share here. This is something that, and I have to apologize to Miss Georgina Stulenbos, lovely Georgina, and because I have not gotten this made up yet, unfortunately, but I need to. And it's the Dutch support poster. And for those of you who don't know, Georgina Stulenbos runs the Dutch support page. She translates a lot of stuff from English to Dutch for everybody over there, and so that they can read like our stuff, in their own language and stuff over there. She does a lot of this stuff. She does a lot of work. And she had her husband make up this image which I intend to have eventually hanging as a one of the pieces of or pictures behind me, and this is what it is. So this is a picture of Johan Cruyff, who is arguably one of the most famous soccer players in the world. He's, world stupid notifications. He's known around the world and very, very well known. Anyway, her and her husband had this made up, and it's I thought it's brilliant. So eventually this will be hanging on the wall behind me, as a symbol of the Dutch support, the Netherlands, and that sort of thing over there. And I think it's brilliant. It's something that her and her husband came up with. He made this on his computer, and I think it's brilliant. So I wanted to share it with you guys. It's going to be on the wall behind me soon. And I'm also going to have the Irish rally support poster eventually hanging on the wall behind me here very soon.
Yeah, dude, the guy's name is Johan Cruyff.
Johan Cruyff. Sorry,
Johan
everybody.
Cruyff.
It's Johan Cruyff. Sorry.
Yeah. And very, very famous footballer and manager. He was the player with Ajax of Amsterdam originally. He very famously, he's got a move in football, known as the Cruyff turn, where he left an Argentinian defender on his backside very embarrassingly. He also very famously took a penalty where they actually passed the ball to the side, and then the player running in passed it back again for him to score. Just total showmanship. Great player. He then went on to play for Barcelona. He then went on to be a manager of Barcelona when they won the European Cup. Unfortunately, Holland or the Netherlands, they've never actually won the World Cup, but they've came very, very close on a few occasions. And certainly here in the UK, there's always been a steady stream of Dutch players that have come to the UK, and they've been really, really good players to watch. You know what I mean? They've got a flair about them that you enjoy when you see them playing. And so that's what I would say about Johan Cruyff. Yes, he is definitely one of the, and he's not like Maradona with his hand of God. He's he was a good bloke. So yeah, Johan Cruyff. I like that picture a lot. In fact, I was in the bar in Amsterdam, quite a few bars in Amsterdam. There are a lot of pictures of Johan Cruyff in various in various sort of team photos. Sorry?
There's a soccer town there?
Yeah. I say, what was that word you used?
I said
soccer.
Anyways,
soccer?
Are they a football town there, dude? Jesus,
they are.
Good grief.
The world game. Hey, talking about it, would you believe it? The Packers actually won today.
Is that so shocking? Oh, I know they're firing their head coach and everything, right?
Shocking.
I haven't been keeping up with football. I've been too busy.
American football.
Well, I know the Rams are kicking butt, actually. Only one loss.
No, it's,
although that could have changed today. I don't know what they did today, but anyway.
No, what game were they? They might be the late game.
Oh, they could be. They could be the late night game, or they could be the Monday night game. Who knows?
Yeah.
I haven't checked.
Yeah. Certainly, it was a very good show in Amsterdam at the theatre. There was a good turnout. The queue. What struck me was the queue of people buying Illusion of Justice. Jerry was there for a good 20-25 minutes, signing, taking photographs. That there was a huge long queue, and then he got this dude at the end that produced typical Scotsman. He didn't buy a book there; he bought his own with him.
Yeah. and then you handed him the shirt behind you, and got him to take a picture with it, right?
It was actually the one you sent me that I got him because
it's a different one.
The hashtag Brendan Dassey on it.
Oh, I see. That's the one you had made. That's right.
Yeah. So yes, and Unfortunately, the other question I put down on the form was the fact that, forget the staircase. We're not worried about Michael Peterson and Stephen Avery and Brendan Dassey. What we really want to know is, you know the question.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The control question?
No, the crunch question.
The crunch question.
So they didn't answer that one. But no, it was. I mean, it's funny because Jerry, when I said about taking a picture of him with the T-shirt, he thought I wanted him to put it on. He said, "Is it all right if I just hold it?"
Yeah.
and then you thought that I'd given him that T-shirt, right?
Well, for a second I did, yeah.
There was no way on this earth I was going to give away what you had sent me. Yeah, I know.
That's all right. I went back and deleted it and told Jerry I'd send him one. Just let me know, dude.
Yeah. I mean, even if Kathleen Zellner asks for my T-shirt, she ain't getting it.
Well, that reminds me, I got to send Marissa, sorry.
Yeah.
I got to send Marissa her shirt.
Because she won it, didn't she?
Yes.
Yeah.
And then I owe her one because she's mod. So I think I owe her two at this point. I think that's what we worked out.
Oh, right. Oh, well, you'll be keeping her in clothes then.
Yeah, I guess,
You can just send me one in every color, and then I can just wear a different one every day.
There you go.
Well, of course, the thing is that me and Mark have already started making plans for the follow-up T-shirt,
Oh.
It's going to be Erekose on YouTube. And if you haven't done so already, please hit subscribe.
Make sure you got Make sure you got my caricature on there.
Oh yeah.
Oh, it's not here. I'd have to. Anyway, the drawing I had made at Comic-Con.
Mm-hmm.
Make sure that's on there somewhere.
You. It's behind you.
It is behind me. Yes.
Yeah.
Let me see if I can make it appear here. There. That. Right. So.
Yeah.
Oops. This right here. That should be on the shirt somewhere.
Yeah. I meant. At least you're wearing a tie in that one.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I actually had to pull up a YouTube video for the guy so that he could see, so that he could draw my shirt and the tie and everything. And then I went and sat down so that he could draw my face and everything else.
Yeah.
So. Okay. So. Yes, everybody that wants a shirt, I'm getting to that. I am, trust me. Sorry, Adrian. I know you emailed me. I'll be getting to that soon. Let's see. Somebody else said something up here. Rams are playing the Bears. Now everybody's talking about football. Let's see here. And then there'll be a great big poster from the rally with your cozy heads. My Chiefs made the playoffs today. Oh, all right. Chiefs made the playoffs. Woohoo. Patriots lost to Miami. Wow. Anyway.
Right. Tell me about this interview that you did in Manitowoc.
Dude, what?
Tell me about the interview that you did in Manitowoc that you thought was for making a murder.
I didn't know what it was for. I figured it could have been. I didn't know. I honestly was confused which camera crew might be which from the beginning when I was there. So I never knew which one I was talking to. But I was aware it could be either one.
Specifically, was it one of these ones where you see them in the court, and when the reporters say to either Kratz or Schimmel, could you say your name and spell your surname? Was it that kind of thing that you had to do? Because you said you had to give your name.
I had to say where I lived and my actual name. I couldn't say I was Erekose on Making a Murder. That wasn't going to fly. But I did end up telling them all about my YouTube channel as well as my name and where I live. Okay, so we got some questions here in the chat that people are getting kind of want answered. So let's see. Silverback is asking about what we think about the supposed account of Stephen filling the gas cans by Dave Bogatka at the gas station. I don't know how many times I've answered this, but basically I think if he was there filling up gas cans, he was filling up gas cans for the numerous things around the property that ran on gas. That's kind of just what I think about that. I don't know really what else there is to say there. Some people are trying to, I guess, might be reasoning that he was using all of that gas to burn Teresa. I don't think he would need all of that gas. All you need to do is get the fire started and keep throwing fuel on it. You don't need gas. Gas is just something to get it started. So he doesn't need 500 gallons of gas to burn Teresa, if that's what everybody's thinking. So I don't know. For me, it's just, if he was there getting some gas for the needs of the salvage yard. For me, the fact that he's there when supposedly he's supposed to be murdering Teresa and getting rid of her body and doing all these things, and the fact that he's over at the gas station, to me, is really more of a problem for the prosecution than it is for Zellner. But that's my thoughts anyway. Marissa?
Absolutely.
You've been quiet for a while.
Oh, I was looking for my daughter.
Oh, okay. Go ahead, Paul.
No, it was just that obviously this all this tweeting by Kathleen Zellner recently about the fact that, you know, in 4 days' time and 3 days' time, you know, these people are going to have to take the bags off their heads, and that made me think. I have been constantly looking to see when is this convicting a murderer thing coming out, you know, and I've got sort of internet searches that I did, you know, of articles way back when they first announced it, and I'm just curious as to what on earth is Zellner talking about.
I'm sorry, say that again.
No, and you don't know what she's talking about when she's talking about people having to take the bags off their heads.
Only I imagine she's talking to the same people she was talking to when she initiated her $10,000 you know, contest, where if anybody could answer her 100 questions that they would win the 10,000. I think she's talking to those same people who didn't want to give up their ID to claim $10,000 and answer all of her questions. I think she's talking about that crowd, which would be the SAIG crowd. Stephen Avery's guilty crowd on Reddit, I would think.
Okay.
That's my thought, anyway. I don't know.
Yeah.
Any thoughts of your own, buddy? That's who.
No,
by the way, that's who Puzzled by It All is, a Redditor.
Yes, yeah, absolutely, yeah. There's and that was one that was specifically mentioned in the Kathleen Zellner tweets. And is there not a suspicion that a lot of these people that believe that Stephen Avery are guilty are actually lawyers within Wisconsin?
I'm sorry, say that one more time because I'm trying to follow the chat a little bit here.
Yeah, no, it was just that is it not suggested that, like that one that you mentioned, and a few of the others that think that Stephen is guilty, they are actually lawyers, or they're involved in the legal system in some way?
Well, we know that the person, I don't know that they're lawyers, but we know that the person that sent flowers to Judge Sugowitz, that is a cousin of Dennis Vogel.
Exactly.
That's an interesting little tidbit for those of you who didn't know that. And I have a video about that if you want to go check it out.
I'll tell you something else as well. Last night I was I think, you know, I was doing a lot of messaging with John Farrak. And he put a very interesting tweet out about it showed the picture of Kratz with all the Wisconsin journalists around him, you know,
right?
Which we've seen a couple of times, and I just had to ask him, you know, how is it that these journalists are so bad? You know, they are such appalling journalists. And he said that, you know, in actual fact, that one of them, or at least one of them, during the time of the Holbach investigation and trial, was regularly out playing golf with Kratz. You know, wow, that, you know, yeah, quite pally. And look, you know, it's up to them how they get their stories, and you know that in itself isn't a crime or anything, but you can't help thinking that unfortunately it definitely does cloud their interpretation of the facts. What really bugs me, and I think it bugs a lot of people, is the way that they were quite happy to report the March 2nd press conference. I think that's the one thing that really does annoy.
Yeah.
Well, I think everybody is just so appalled at that because that would never be allowed. You've got up there in Canada, that would never be allowed. That would never have been allowed in Amsterdam. Now we know that Amsterdam has got a kind of laissez-faire attitude toward things,
right?
But here in the UK, no way would a prosecutor have gotten away with that. That case would have never even got to trial because the judge would have just said to the Crown Prosecution Service, "You can't do that. That's just totally against our rules." Yeah,
certainly. So I want to go ahead and talk about things here a little bit in the chat so that the people in the live chat feel involved.
Yes.
Let's see. Politically, it will take a gutsy state governor that's righteous, which they are almost non-existent, and that's the hope. Well, I saw something today that I actually saw an article today when I was on Twitter and clicked on it, and it showed that it looks like the Wisconsin legislature really, really, really just embarrassed themselves big time, because now that there was a Democratic governor, they essentially made a power grab to try to gather all the power in the state and taking powers away from Josh Cowell, the AG, and trying to take powers away from Tony Evers, the new governor, trying to take away powers from their offices and gather them unto the legislature now. And it's like this power grab, and it's basically now a huge embarrassment for the two main Republican, like the House leader, and then the other guy. One of them's named Vos, and the other one I can't remember his name. And then what it is this little power grab they attempted is really just turning out to be a huge embarrassment, because they actually tried it. And Wisconsin has had a reputation for having very clean government until they pulled this little fiasco that they pulled here recently. So I thought that was interesting. The voters are probably going to be rectifying that as soon as they possibly can the next time they vote for their representatives in their House of Representatives and the senators there in their legislature. So I think that's interesting.
I want to go back to what Paul said there for a second and just kind of say that when you live in a small town or county, like what was Manitowoc, 27,000 people, everybody knows everybody. Everybody who golfs is going to have golfed with a prosecutor or a judge who has also golfed. So to say like there's some sort of bias is kind of unfair, because like just based on that, because the population dictates that they're all going to shop at the same grocery stores, they're banking at the same places, they know the same people, and it does add a level of unfair to a criminal proceeding, but it can't really be removed either because of the population itself.
Absolutely. Just a small pool, basically. Yeah. All right. So Denise Rainey asks, what does everyone on the panel hope is in Zellner's brief? If you could pick one thing, what would it be? So my answer to that is going to be, I'm just going to say what's going to be in there. And I hope Travis is right that she's going to be able to slip some things in there about the battery, because the battery is already in queso. So hopefully that's going to open the door for her to be able to talk about the battery. But mainly what she's going to be talking about on December 20th is how Tom Fassbender holding that CD in his own personal custody for 12 years, coupled with the fact of the way that the prosecution handed over the Brady evidence, and in terms of the 7 DVDs and the Fassbender report. So there's those things. So she's going to be talking about all that and how the prosecution was playing games and preventing the defense from being able to discover the content on this computer that would have raised Bobby Dassey to the point of being a third party suspect that would have met Denny. what's going to be being argued is she's going to be arguing about how they handed it over with basically 3 weeks to spare and how they were jamming the defense up, how they turned over the Fassbender report basically only 3 or 4 days before the CDs, literally still 3 weeks before Denny when they had it for already 8 months. Okay, so this is what's all going to be getting argued, because she's going to say, she's arguing and going to be arguing that the state was trying to hide this, that instead of openly turning this over and giving the defense actually enough time to actually have been able to process it and find out what was there, they were turning it over in a way to jam the defense up with very little time before Denny was due, so that they would not be able to get Bobby to meet the Denny standard. Because trust me, if they raise Bobby to Denny, he's no longer going to be the prosecution's star witness, because the prosecution knows he's going to get ripped and shredded in front of the jury, right? So that's how that works. So your guys' thoughts?
Well, yeah, just one point about the Denny stuff, though, of course, to bear in mind is that Denny will only come into play if there is a retrial.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm not even convinced.
But we're talking about what could have happened at the original trial, and that's why this is right.
Yep. No, we'll just have to wait and see. Apparently, it's going to be 36,000 words or something.
Yeah.
Luckily, you'll be reading.
Yeah, I'll be doing it to you. I'll be reading it to you, right? Yeah.
I know that you're pro Dean and Jerry, and I'm not necessarily against them the way Laura is, but I do agree that they didn't do everything that they should have done in order to have met Denny. And but going with that, they also didn't the investigation itself didn't allow for much wiggle room, because there was no other suspect ever looked at. So in order for them to have even tried to meet Denny, they would have had to have hired a PI basically in order to have looked into Ryan, looked into Teresa's, because most crimes, they start with the victim and then you branch out. And in this case, they started with a suspect then worked in.
Right. Right.
Yeah, one of the problems as well is that Dean and Jerry, they actually hired an expert to look at Brendan's false confession, didn't they? Yeah. He was never used, and he was even offered to Brendan's attorneys, wasn't it? What was the guy's name? Fremgen, remember? Fremgen, right. Yeah, and Edelstein.
Yeah.
And they didn't take up the offer of this expert for free. So, Dean and Jerry, they didn't bring that cabinet into court. Did they just assume that because the key was coming in that Kratz would bring the cabinet as well? For me, that's assuming too much, isn't it?
Yeah.
That should have been done, and for me, I couldn't believe that Nick Stolte was allowed to get away with saying that the squiggle by the ignition. Oh yeah, that was done by that could have been done by somebody's finger,
right,
rubbing there, because these are the sort of things that you expect to see in a trial, aren't they? They're the things that you expect. Somebody to bring in an expert to counterbalance what the other side has just said.
Right.
So the lack of the bookcase being brought in, and the lack of, at least as Kathleen Zellner points out, a blood splatter expert would have spatter. and it splatters. It's got,
it does, I guess.
We have splatter as well.
I'm just a stickler. I'm just a stickler, I guess. So.
And it's spatter. It's with a D, is it? Or is it?
No, it's SPATTER. Spatter.
Well, that's a spatter, not spatter.
Yeah. Anyways, Silverback has another question. Did Fassbender know about the battery when he told BD they know SA went under the hood? I know he was fishing to get into the garage. I think that's a fair assumption, Silverback. I think that's a very good explanation that might have had for why Tom Fassbender may have been pushing Brendan to say things happened in the garage so much. I think that's a highly probable scenario. Your guys' thoughts on that?
Definitely. Everything that they fed to Brendan already fit their narrative.
Right. So
And
very well they could have led them that way, right?
yeah, and then the second, well, okay, the day after his arrest,
Right.
Kratz goes and gives this big long fantasy press release, further tainting potential jurors and ruining the Avery name and the Dassey name at that.
Yeah.
And I don't think that you could put together an elaborate fantasy like that based off the interview from the day before.
Yeah, certainly. Travis just said something about the interesting about the bookcase, but do you want to take a shot at this, Paul, real quick?
Well, it was just that certainly it's one of the things that's listed in when Stephen Avery writes into one of the magazines and complains about Dean and Jerry. He says that it would have been so easy to have done a reconstruction of the finding of the key.
Right.
Whether or not that was done in court or whether it was done somewhere else, but they should have done something to disprove, to show, but maybe they just thought, well, it's so painfully obvious that key did not just drop there, by magic, but then as Zellner points out, you have to spell out everything sometimes to people, don't you? You have to really present the whole lot. So yeah, whether or not the judge would have allowed a reconstruction, I think that's what Travis is saying, that maybe they wouldn't have done it. It reminds me of O.J. Simpson putting on the glove. You probably know more about that than I do, but that was a big turning point, wasn't it, in that case?
Yeah, certainly.
So whether or not Andy Colburn could have been, instructed by the court, well, show us how that key dropped out.
Yeah, well, I
don't know.
I don't see how it could have happened. I even got my own cabinet that's pretty much just like Stephen's and did my own experiments. I don't understand how they could have hid it. I don't see how it could have been, as Colburn puts it, cleverly hidden. I don't know what that means. I don't see anywhere where it can be cleverly hidden or it with no matter where I hide it on that thing. And trust me, all cops carry what I carry, and that's a little mag light or a little flashlight on them, just so that when they get down into cabinets, I'm looking at electronics usually, but when they're getting down and looking for clues or whatever, they have a little light that they flash in there. And when I do that in my video, you can clearly see that if it's wedged in between the backing and the shelf or wedged in between the side wall and the shelf, no matter what, you're seeing this thing. It sticks out and you can't miss it, especially with that big blue lanyard on it. So it's like, yeah, whatever's going on with the cabinet is just ridiculous.
Well, one of the things that's always struck me is that, as John Farrack mentions, we've got these two crackerjack detectives from Manitowoc, Lenk and Colburn. Since when was Andy Colburn trained to treat any item of evidence roughly? He says, I must admit, I'll be the first to admit, I did treat it a bit roughly, twisting it. Why were you twisting it? If you want to inspect it, you just turn it round, don't you?
Yeah.
Why? What? No, I don't buy that at all. I don't think that that even detectives as poor as Lenk and Colburn were trained to be rough with it. That's just a complete and utter nonsense. And that's the one thing I do hope that we get out of this is to see Andy Colburn facing some sort of civil suit. Right.
So Travis is just trying to say that Jerry wanted to drop the key in court, but the judge stopped him. I remember Kratz objecting. I guess he sustained the objection, so that's basically him stopping Jerry. But I guess, Travis, what a lot of people have said is that they feel that Jerry could have requested that cabinet be brought in and to recreate the conditions. Are you saying you believe that Judge Willis would have denied that as well? Is that your feeling, your opinion on it?
Well, we just don't know, do we?
Well, that's why I'm asking Travis for clarification, because this is coming from him. So go ahead. Go ahead, Paul. Sorry.
No, as I say, there's quite a few things that Dean and Jerry, that they could have done. I mean, obviously, you're going to have. We touched on it earlier about the fact that you've got journalists playing golf with Ken Kratz. You've got Jerry on the same commission along with. Peg Lautenschlager, Tom Fallon, they're all on the same commission. As you say, they have to, within their work, that's what they have to do anyway. We can't really hold that against him. But they never told Stephen, apparently, that, Stephen didn't know about how, let's put it this way, how Pally, for example, Dean was with Tom Fallon.
Mm-hmm.
They would regularly meet up for coffee,
right?
And
they were kind of buddies, right?
Yeah, and certainly in this book, Jerry is complimentary, shall I say, towards Norm Garn. Now, when he comes out and he says about sometimes, you just have to use common sense, with the sort of, the Sherry Colhane introducing her DNA into the one shot at getting the DNA out of the bullet,
Mm-hmm.
And when you've got these prosecutors coming out and saying, sometimes, people accept that sometimes things aren't perfect, and sometimes you just have to use your common sense.
Yeah.
What on earth are you on about? This is a court of law. Somebody's life is resting on this. You have to get it right. It's no good saying, oh, I think we can allow a bit of common sense. Yeah, common sense when it suits you, pal.
Yeah.
Anyway, don't get me started on.
Okay. All right, so let's move on to another thing here.
Yeah. I mean, what's going to be interesting is what once this stuff is submitted on the 20th, is how long does it take then for the appeals court to sort of look at it? You once mentioned the fact that you thought that the reason she's increased the word count to 36,000 is to give these judges a taste of what Dean and Jerry had to face when they were given all this stuff with, like, what was it, 3 weeks to go?
Right.
Before Denny?
Yeah. It could be. I mean, it could be that's part of what she's doing. I mean, in a small way.
Yep. And then we'll just have to wait and see when what they decide. And I'm not too sure whether the case then gets sent back again to a circuit court. But it's interesting as well that John Farrack mentions that in Wisconsin, you can request a judge to be changed, and
Mm-hmm.
Angela Superwitch is the fourth most popular judge to be changed. She's the fourth most changed judge. The one that people want substituted.
Right.
In other words, they don't want her.
Yeah.
Which is quite astonishing, because Sheboygan isn't one of these sort of densely populated areas. It's considered rural. It's not considered like Milwaukee and Madison and Green Bay. It's so for her to be the fourth most substituted judge.
Yeah, she is. I believe it was fourth. Yeah. Fourth most.
How do you guys feel about her refusing to recuse herself even after being asked?
Yeah.
Especially knowing that she was on the civil case and didn't want to drop that.
Yeah, that's. I mean, she does seem to
hold on
have.
hold on a sec. Since when does conflict of interest apply in Wisconsin?
That's true. Yes, hindsight's 2020, and we can pick Dean and Jerry apart all day, but their hands were tied by Willis and unethical prosecution. Unfair to destroy them, but very strategic for KZ to use them to get a retrial. Exactly. The ineffective assistance counsel tool is a tool in the post-conviction lawyer's belt or toolbox, and that's just one of the tools. So when she's going after Dean and Jerry here, I mean, she's partially doing it seriously because she feels that if they had really looked into those particular things that she's criticizing better, that it would have been better for Stephen. So there's that side of it. But on the other hand, you know, there's how much could Stephen's lawyers do? They didn't have $1 million to spend on it like the state did. So I mean, limited resources, limited time, limited, you know, when everything's limited, but with the state it's not limited, that's where these problems creep in, because obviously Dean and Jerry were struggling to meet the burden to you know, oppose the state on this as well as they should have been.
And scrolling back just a little bit, some Deborah Hoffman said Dean and Jerry never deposed Bobby nor interviewed him. They had to do it in the middle of the trial after the mic conversation.
Exactly.
And I'm just wondering, did they depose anybody? I don't remember if they did. Or was that something that they were denied in a motion? I'm
actually not sure. I don't know if they were denied or if maybe they just, because it was a prosecution witness, maybe they didn't get the chance to depose them. Maybe you only get the chance to depose your own witnesses. I don't know. Maybe I'm wrong, but well, let's see. Dean and Jerry are cooperating with KZ and IAC. They're supplying affidavits. Yeah.
And they've actually said in the documentary she should say on whatever of counsel.
You don't get depositions in criminal cases. Sorry. Go ahead.
Okay.
Travis said.
Yeah, Dean and Jerry said in the ma'am too that she should be pursuing ineffective assistance of counsel.
Right.
So they're clearly on board with it. They're not
mad at her.
They're not sitting there butt hurt going.
Right. Exactly.
Like Kaczynski, they're sitting there and going, oh, well, I started the whole control question argument and being all proud of himself when meanwhile he was the cause of it being like he brought in O'Kelly, he allowed for the phone calls with Barb, he encouraged it, and then he starts taking credit for it. It's just such a contrast.
Right. Yeah, I think the most interesting thing that I heard was the fact that Mike Holbach, I think it was after Brendan had been sentenced, you know, to remain incarcerated. What is it till 2048? That Mike Holbach says, you know, that, well, you know, he should have taken the plea bargain. Well, hold on a sec. If Brendan did actually kill your sister, do you not want him to spend the rest of his life in prison? You know, why are you saying that you would have liked him to have taken the plea bargain? Is that because you're thinking, it would have been better if Brendan had testified against Steve, because then there would have been a witness to go along with all the other junk evidence?
Yeah. Right. The witness to go, which witness? I'm sorry. Say it one more time.
Yeah. So Mike Holbach.
Yes.
This is somebody that pointed out to me, a comment that was pointed out to me, that Mike Holbach, once Brendan is sentenced to, you know, life. What was at the time it was 40 odd years, wasn't it? Because he's due to be released in 2048.
Right. Saying
that Brendan should have taken the plea bargain, and he would have been out in 20 years. Well, if you actually think, if you're Mike Holbach and you think that Brendan Dassey did kill your sister, why are you wanting him to have been released after just 20 years?
Right.
You see what I
Where
mean?
it's not about, yeah, they're okay. So I see which way you're drifting here. So it's not about feeling safe from somebody they feel is a murderer. It's just more about as long as the conviction sticks, then they can get out sooner.
It
Right?
would have been another thing that would have been used to convict Stephen had Brendan testified.
Right.
The fact that he didn't, you know, and for Mike Holbach to come out and say, you know, he should have taken the plea bargain when he got the chance to. Why?
Right.
Because it was just another thing that they could have used against Steve. And as I'm saying, if Mike Holbach actually thought that Brendan Dassey had anything to do with killing Teresa, you know,
yeah,
he'd be the first one to you know, pop a cap in his ass, as you say, you know. he would be the first one to want to do it. You know, if you know that person killed your sister, you wouldn't want to be them. You wouldn't stand there and say, oh, he should have taken the plea bargain so that he only does 20 years instead of 40 odd years.
Okay. Travis is saying, oh, what the hell? Mott Duento be released in 2048. He is eligible for parole in 48. Oh, okay. So he's saying it's not definite that he'll be released in 2048. That's just the first time he becomes available for parole. And if he doesn't, and if he's not willing to admit to it, they will probably not allow him to get out. Most likely. That's the way they work in Wisconsin.
Well, that's how it works pretty much everywhere, isn't it? In the States anyway, with parole, probation, you have to admit guilt and accept wrongdoing and show sympathy for what you've done to show that you've been reformed enough to be allowed to be put back into society.
Right.
And that's why Stephen didn't get parole for the Penny Bernstein case, because he refused to admit guilt.
Right.
Yep.
So he sat there for an extra, I think, 8 years.
Yep.
After he was eligible for parole, because he was not saying I did it.
Yep.
Okay, so Ingeborg Svensson here is talking about Laura's video about Brendan when he talks about the Blazer. I think he's just talking about Blazers. I think Blazers were popular cars. Obviously, Stephen had one. Bobby had one. I'm sure he probably knew about 5 other people that had one, because they are hugely popular off-roading cars. They're highly sought after. So this person's saying that Brendan claims Stephen was pissed at her because she did not want to put his Blazer in the book, but she already had. And that's true, Ingeborg. That is exactly true. It doesn't make sense that we can incriminate Stephen with Brendan's comment about a Blazer, because Stephen couldn't have been pissed off at Brendan or at Teresa for not taking the picture, because she had taken a picture of Stephen's Blazer and put it in the Auto Trader. So Brendan's statement could not apply to Stephen, essentially, is what that comes down to. So now obviously they're gonna say it applies to Bobby, because he did have a Blazer and he hadn't been able to put that in Auto Trader, or it hadn't been in Auto Trader at that point. So that would be the only Blazer on the property that would fit the criteria, in my opinion. So any thoughts on the Blazers, guys, or have you watched Laura's video? I know Marissa has.
Well,
I watched all the videos.
I know.
The Blazer, I don't know. Do we know if Stevens was sold, for one? I know it had been already photographed and stuff. Had it been sold?
I don't know, but I mean, that wouldn't have been
for sale. So if it was sold, that makes it a big difference.
I would say that if he got it in the Auto Trader and everything, yeah, well, he wouldn't be mad at her about that. That would not, right? He would have got what he wanted. He would have been satisfied.
Yeah, I don't think, though, even if it was Bobby that was a bit miffed at not getting his Blazer in the Auto Trader, I don't think that would be reason for hunting her down on the 31st. Do you?
Yeah.
I just don't get where this because Brendan has said something. I know this sounds harsh, but we must ignore everything that Brendan has ever said on this case.
Well, especially when he was being forced into saying it by Fassbender and Wiegert. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Everything that comes from them has to be, gone over with a fine-tooth comb.
And the other thing is we don't know if what things have been said to Brendan by possibly Bobby.
Yeah.
I always found this business of I read it in the book Kiss the Girls. I always found that very, very odd. It's been suggested that how could Brendan with a learning disability and a mental age of 11 be able to read a novel like that?
Well,
I think he watched the movie.
I know he referred to the novel on the stand, but the movie actually came out in '98. I seen it, and it's one of my favorite movies, actually.
Mhm.
And given the searches on Bobby's computer, I'm pretty sure that they probably had all seen it because
Yes.
it is a psychological thriller, and it does have to do with the things that at least someone in that house was interested in. So I don't think it's too far-fetched to say that he was very well aware of the movie.
Yeah, but there's a difference, isn't there, between being aware of the movie and having watched the movie, and also there's things in the movie that are not in the book, or vice versa.
Exactly.
For Brendan to have said, what book does that come out of? As I say, I think we've got to discount anything that Brendan says, whether it makes him look good or bad, because it's just all, the whole point of a confession is clearer. With Brendan Dassey, what nonsense we heard, and I'm not being cruel to Brendan, you realise that, of course, but we cannot take anything of what Brendan said in any of those interviews in face value, as far as I'm concerned. It's all got to be discarded.
Another thing too, in jails, they have books. TV and that sort of thing is not their main source of entertainment. Right. And he was working towards getting his high school, and he had been in jail, 2 years before the trial? He could have read that book. It's not, they have crime books and everything. It's just whatever people donate to the jails. So he could have read the book. Maybe he couldn't comprehend all of the words in the book, but it doesn't mean that he didn't read the book.
Right.
Yeah, but I certainly remember from my school days when the whole class was given books, particularly, for example, the biology books. You'd always get the wise guy that would find the bits in the biology book that the other guys would find interesting. Mm-hmm. And for me, if it did come out of a book, I would tend to believe that if that bit is true, then somebody has said to Brendan, about this passage in the book, or this right. bit of the film. As I said, I don't think we can take anything that Brendan says, whether it's makes him look good or bad. Well, it all makes him look bad, but it makes the Bert and Ernie look far worse because they've. Their whole investigation has been proven to be completely and utterly false. For me, it just beggars belief that some people out there still think that Steve and Brendan are guilty, and even worse so, that some people think that Brendan is innocent, but that Steve is guilty. That's the one that I can't understand. That just defies logic for me.
Hello, Karen. Welcome back.
It's still going.
Yeah, it's actually probably winding down now, but anyway.
I just thought I'd check. I still had it going on my iPad. And Falcon's around, so I just had to come back.
Ah, yeah, he just came in.
Who?
Falcon.
So let's see what we got here in the chat.
The draw card.
What do you have? Some stuff with sleep when you're up all night discussing this stuff? I'm not up all night discussing this stuff. I gotta get some sleep. Not right now, but
that's what you live on the other side of the world. That's the easy thing. Come to show.
Just looking for, okay, let's see. In Crivets, Brendan was told that Stephen came up to the bus stop on the morning of 11/1 and said he had a buyer. So once again, proves that he got his blazer in Auto Trader. So the statement that Brendan made during his confession doesn't make sense in it won't apply to Stephen, because Stephen doesn't meet the criteria of never getting his blazer in Auto Trader. He got it in, he got his car sold, so that removes him from the possibility of being who Brendan was talking about. So, in my opinion, yeah. So let's see what else we got here. Brendan is in school. It's like an oral exam, and he is trying to guess the right answer. Absolutely. She had a blue skirt. She had a white shirt, buttoned white shirt, black shirt, and so on. Right. He just keeps guessing and guessing and guessing. Right.
One thing that actually just popped into my head about what she was wearing is they had said they found the rivet or whatever off of her jeans.
Yeah.
And a cheap metal rivet not melt and still have identifying factors in a fire that was able to burn teeth.
Right. Exactly. Right. Of the many things that don't line up.
Yeah, I'm going to say we've got to remember this. This is Wisconsin, and certain laws of physics and gravity do not apply there. You know,
the gravity pulls sideways. The wrong things catch fire.
Yeah.
Well, I can't really comment because, as I was explaining to everyone earlier, Australia doesn't exist because of the flat Earth situation. So we have alternate physics and gravity situation here. So maybe I could comment, or maybe all of the metal has come over here. But yeah, I'm a paid actor because of the flat Earth.
If you find a bunch of, can you tell us if they're Teresa's?
I will.
Okay.
All right. I'm going to step away for just a minute, guys. I'll be back. I got to go to the restroom.
Okay. Oh. He'll be back in 2 shakes. Oh. Sorry.
Don't worry, Paul will take over, and I'm sure he'll be micturating all over my rug while I'm gone.
I will indeed be micturating all over your rug.
Does that mean I gave him the poops?
I've no idea.
No, Karen, I've just been sitting here for 2 hours and nature calls. Sorry.
Okay.
Go water the pony. It's okay.
Siphon the python. Yes. Yeah, I wonder what you ladies think about the corruption in Wisconsin, and whether Kathleen Zellner is beginning to realize just how bad that corruption is, or do you think she had a notion before she took on the case?
Oh, she had to know. She had to know, I think, because she's dealt with wrongful convictions for so long. I mean, it can't be isolated to just Wisconsin. So I don't think she would have taken on this case had she not already done some preliminary investigation and groundwork and looked into the case and the political situation. I'd be very surprised if she didn't do a little bit of digging. Whether she knew perhaps the extent of it that she does now, probably not, but I'd say she would have had at least some idea. I mean, and she would have known the situation from the 85, 86 case. So she at least knew that there was that setup or that, dodgy situation from back then. So because that was obviously public record. So she knew that, there was that.
Yep.
Yeah, had to.
I mean, certainly in the John Farrat book, interestingly enough, it was he actually mentioned that he was doing this book way back to me in September, and the way he put it was the fact that, you know, because I'd been on it, John, for ages about the fact that, you know, why have you moved away from you know, Wisconsin? You know, I didn't realize that he was actually doing this book, and he was saying that he actually would go and visit with Kathleen Zellner at least once a week to find out what was happening in the case, you know, and to stay up to speed and to find out all about it. Interesting, isn't it, that Laura Perplexed, she did a video. Was it about corruption in, was it Kenosha or Sheboygan or what? Which county was it that she pointed
I think it
out?
was in Sheboygan, but
Yeah.
my brain is broken. But I think it was Sheboygan.
Yeah, I think it was Sheboygan, the one that has all the syllables in it. I think
But I was just going to answer Paul's question there about Kathleen. What I find interesting is that Kathleen had been asked by the girl that Stephen, that older woman, through emails and stuff like that many times, and she had never heard back. And then Kathleen said, yeah, Kathleen said that then she watched Making a Murderer and she was like, oh,
right.
And that's why she jumped on the case, because then all of a sudden the emails that she had been ignoring made sense. So yeah. I don't think that she fully was aware of the corruption until she saw Making a Murderer, and all of the sketchy stuff just kind of like picked at her brain.
Yeah, and then she would have really looked into it, I think, because she's like that. Yeah, she's like a bloodhound. She gets a sniff and then she's like right into it. So I don't think she would have committed to it unless she really knew what was going on.
Yeah, but the emails that she was receiving about the case, those weren't enough to, like, and maybe they would have been eventually to get her on the case, but she couldn't, like, it wasn't something she was interested in for that time. And then Making a Murderer changed that, which kind of then leads to the question, should more documentaries be made in order to get these cases noticed? And I think that is really good that Erekose and Laura and everybody are going ahead and doing the wrongful conviction videos and exposing more and more cases, because maybe a lawyer is sitting there and will go, oh my God, and take a case that is otherwise being ignored in their email.
Well,
yeah, I don't know. That's a hard one, because then, you know, do only interesting cases get made into documentaries, and then the more boring ones they miss out. And so that, you know, but I guess any one that gets picked up that wouldn't have got picked up before is a win. So even if it's just 5% more, 1% more, is that better than nothing? Then you got to feel for the ones that miss out.
Yeah, so it was Sandra Greenman, isn't it? Sandy that's the
Sandy,
the elderly lady that
I like her.
Got in touch with Zellner and had said to Steve about it. And of course, you know, as you quite rightly pointed out, Zellner said, look, you know, looked at the case and said, well, you know, there's the blood, there's the bones, there's the bullet, there's the DNA, and the DNA is a huge problem because it's so easy to plant DNA. And, you know, and as we've discovered, you don't even have to plant it. You don't even have to rub it against the item. You can just swap it for another swab that you've got that just so conveniently happens to have, you know, 90 times more Stephen's DNA. But Wiegert never once in his worst nightmares dreamt that you know, that was going to be exposed years later, did he? You know?
And 13 years ago, when this case happened, they had no clue that Netflix would become a thing. They knew that they were being filmed, but they didn't it wasn't a production company, it wasn't anything. They just thought, oh, these people are just being idiots following the case. And then all of a sudden this comes out and they're all scrambling. And so they did not expect that extreme what's the word, advancement in
Yes.
technology and how social media actually works.
Yeah, that was one of the things that, in fact, Erekose sent a message to. In fact, I think it was on a tweet we sent to David Rudolph. I sent a tweet saying, that look at this video of the case of the lady that fell down the stairs at Wishaw. That would have been really useful for you in the trial of Mike Peterson. And David Rudolph replied, but dude,
No.
we didn't have YouTube back then. It was it's as you say, the explosion in social media has meant that yes, this has been exposed. In fact, I was watching a video. It's the one that Juror 11 got sent by Judge Willis. I don't know if you're aware of these. There are all of the jurors got sent a DVD. In fact, I think it was 2 or 3 DVDs that show the media coverage of the case because they were denied or they were supposed to refrain from watching any media coverage about the case at the time. Judge Willis says, don't worry, once the trial is finished, everybody will be supplied with a DVD. And on one of the DVDs, I think it's number 2, at about the 1:28 mark, you actually see from a bit of news coverage, there's a short clip where you actually see Moira filming one of the interviews at the end of it. It's quite interesting to think that there's that girl with the camera. They had no idea back then that what Moira was doing there was going to have such a profound effect on this case. It's just blown it wide open. Like I said right at the start, if you're going to say that, look, all of this, there could be a reasonable explanation for it, you also have to accept there might not be a reasonable explanation for it. And as far as I'm concerned, the trial did not prove anywhere near beyond a reasonable doubt that Stephen Brendan did anything. And for Kratz to say that he proved it beyond all doubt, again, just a typical ridiculous thing that Ken Kratz says.
But then
anyway, that dude is
he says it's ridiculous.
Yep. Sorry, carry on.
Yeah. No, I said everything he says is ridiculous.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, can't narrow it down to just one thing.
No, certainly not. I mean, the whole again, all the details about Ken Kratz, they're all in the John Farrar book. And, I was really quite surprised. I was expecting the book to be more or less just written details about what we saw in the in Making a Murderer #2 in particular, but it goes so much further than that. I was really surprised at the depth that the coverage goes of what's been going on so far. I thought it was a really, really good book. I like John's style of writing. I think it's very, very, very good. You can tell he's been doing it a long time. He's a good journalist. And he doesn't have to be opinionated. It's not his opinion that's coming across. He's just presenting the facts the way that they are, the way that everybody can see it. And you can easily come to your own conclusion. you can surely realise exactly what's happening there. The one thing I'm not sure about is just how high up the food chain the corruption goes, because certainly when you find out about what they were doing within the Manitowoc Sheriff's Department, it's quite shocking when you actually read about the likes of Kosciuszek. People such as Kenneth Peterson. He killed. It was an accident, but he ran over a woman. But then it was a case of, because of that accident, he was then in Kosciuszek's pocket. He was then. He owed Kosciuszek one for having got him off. Not having. He taken care of the problem and ensured that there was no repercussions for him. I think Mike Bushman also had a similar encounter whereby he got off with something that was really quite serious, and it was just the fact that Kosciuszek, he's one of these guys that, look, probably took him aside. Look, I'll take care of it, but you're in my pocket now. I'll let you off. I'll smooth this all out. It's amazing, isn't it, how much the public perception of Manitowoc Sheriff's Department was so important to them. I didn't quite realise that. We focus on the financial side of this 36 million, but it was purely the embarrassment. And from that embarrassment, then people would have asked questions that they weren't asking at the time, which hopefully will now get asked.
Just imagine had Stephen Avery's had that one hair not been discovered and not been viable for testing, and therefore had he not ever been acquitted of that initial rape, he'd still be in jail. None of this ever would have transpired, and this corruption might never have come to light. Mm-hmm. And now just imagine this going on in counties, I think that's the right word, all around America, or, not all around, but this theoretically could be happening in loads of other places. And there could be loads of other Stephen Averys that have been unfairly picked on because they come from the wrong family and they're just not liked and they don't do the right things, and they've been put in jail for crimes they didn't commit, because we know that happens. How many Stephen Averys are there for whom there isn't evidence that's come to light and they haven't been acquitted? And similar circumstances, are there hundreds? Are there thousands? Right. How many are there out there?
That's the interesting thing with the staircase. The staircase producers had seen that poor people lose, and they wanted to do a case where the person was rich and had every possible thing available to them.
Right.
And in the end, they still lost.
Yeah.
Because he didn't have the same amount of resources as Durham.
No. But didn't Michael Peterson, he called the documentary makers soon after the incident, right? He was the ones that commissioned the documentary.
I think he wanted them to come, and they were probably looking for the opportunity, though, and he was probably the first one.
Yeah. So it worked out well. But I mean, that was kind of weird anyway, right? Why he kind of was so keen to get it all recorded as a documentary.
He knew that right from the word go, they weren't listening to him. They were hell bent on what they believed. They weren't even, it's like I said, once again, they were jumping from evidence-based to suspect-based within minutes, within hours. And we know now from, number one, McCrary, Zellner's expert on investigations, and number two, G-Man Moore, who I recently interviewed on this channel, that jumping from evidence-based to suspect-based too early is problematic. In the least, it's problematic. Generally, though, it leads to huge problems.
That's true. Yeah, that's true. And I guess maybe he was just, from his perspective as a writer, a little bit more acutely aware of that
Right.
That issue. And
He takes the attitude of, I have nothing to hide. If I bring these crews in and I have nothing to hide, that's, you know, it could be that's the way he was reasoning. So,
or wanted to show that perception of, I have nothing to hide, and
Yeah.
went to extremes with it.
right. But I think that the filmmaker, if he had anything juicy, he wasn't going to want to let it stay on the cutting room floor, you know. So I think Michael Peterson was taking a risk. If he was guilty, he was taking a risk having him there, especially as much as they were there.
Yeah, but then he started sleeping with one of the producers. So
I
that
heard
kind
about that. Yeah.
So,
Hey, those Frenchies, what are you gonna do?
the cutting room floor was used for more than just, you know, production.
I'm reminded of a line from Blackadder that Edmund Blackadder says, where he says, "I'm happier than a Frenchman who's invented himself a pair of self-removing trousers." For all my French fans, I love you. I just like quoting Blackadder. Don't take it personally.
You can't go wrong quoting Blackadder.
Oh, Blackadder is so funny. I love that show. Oh my gosh.
Season 3, I think. The one with the Queenie. That's the best one.
Yeah. With Miranda Richardson as Queen Elizabeth. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. And how?
Okay.
Yeah.
Let's see what they're saying in the chat. Go ahead,
Pit
Paul.
the younger and pit the even younger.
Yeah, pit the even younger.
And pit the embryo.
Pit the embryo. Yep. Okay, so actually at the post office in the area where his ST mother was in the hospital. Okay, so now Silverback's asking about Scott Tadych. Oh, Falcon says you look very dapper, Paul.
Oh, thank you very much. I try my best, unlike some dude.
Can you blame them? SA was a sweaty guy. Yeah, but being deplorable isn't a crime. They had even been looking for a way to screw him, and they found one. Are we talking about Stephen Avery there? Brand the fam?
Well, interesting, isn't it? That again, John Farratt goes into a lot more detail about Mr. Tadych that we didn't know.
Yeah, I'm actually was just making notes to that today. He, Scott's got some violent stuff in his past. I mean, which, I mean, I don't know. For me, the fact that violence is there is a little bit concerning. And, obviously I still believe everybody is innocent until proven guilty and has their right to their presumption of innocence. Absolutely. But it does disturb me to see that kind of violence in his past. And I've only started reading about it right now. Was reading today and taking notes, and then got tired and took a nap, and then woke up and had to get on with all my friends here. International hour or 3, however it turns out. Anyways, so but it's interesting that level of that kind of violence, and I guess one of the things was against his own mom, which was kind of like, yikes. Yep. And then what bothered the other thing that bothers me about Scott, and I know Barb will hate me for saying this, but the thing that bothers me about him is that he cannot get that anger in check. Man, dude, get that freaking temper in check, please, because it's not helping. It's just not helping. So that's my theories. That's my thoughts about Scott. That just kind of, since you were bringing up John Farratt, did you have anything else to say about John Farratt?
Well, no, I was just going to mention. We were talking about when Steve was obviously found guilty in '85, and he would have had he done his full 32 years, it would have been last year that he would have been released, wouldn't he? That would have been his 32 years up. Right. And of course he didn't, and it's his stubbornness that's the big problem here, because what I'm sure that what Manitowoc wanted Steve to do was to admit to it and then come back to Manitowoc with his tail between the legs, you know, and oh, don't worry, I'll stay out of trouble. I'll not do any more stupid stuff. And you know, of course, that didn't happen, did it? You know, he's released after 18 years, and it's all to do with their public image.
Yeah.
Zurich knew how important it was for the people in Manitowoc to think that they've got this fantastic police department, you know, that they got the Penny Bernstein attack sorted with the, you know, what was it? Well, it was that night, wasn't it?
Yeah.
It was that night that they arrested Steve, wasn't it? About 11 o'clock at night.
Right.
That Peterson, Bushman, and Arland Avery that actually went along, and they took along Arland, didn't they? His uncle.
Yeah. Yes.
In order to, you know, to speak to Steve initially, and the other two guys sort of.
And Mike Bushman was there.
Yeah. Yep. And the fact that they're bringing these guys out, Bushman and Diedering, to, you know, to sort of carry on the case. Very interesting. You know, you don't need these guys.
And it's interesting that Bushman never had to do a single report. That really bugs me. Like, I didn't realize that there was no Bushman report.
I didn't think anybody in Manitowoc had to write a report, did they? But since when have they had to write reports?
Well, we have 1,300 pages of report, and not one of the sentences was written by Bushman.
You don't have to write. I mean, Culhane didn't have to write a report either until the day after Stephen Avery got released from prison. So you don't have to write a report unless there are implications of, you know, the information you've got. So you can sit on it for 18 years or something like that. But if something becomes important, then you have to write a report and update
the report I'm talking about was when on the very first day they were searching Cuss Road, Bushman brought everybody over to Cuss Road, and then kind of as a diversion, and then he never wrote a report. He was the lead investigator for one day on the Avery property. Where's the report?
Are you suggesting that these people don't write a report? What, because you think they've got something to hide? Surely not.
No,
These are crackerjack detectives, you know?
I feel like if you just go to Sturm Road, all the answers are there, and you don't even need to look for the report. Mm-hmm. It's just there.
Exactly.
Right.
Yeah. You can decide it there to the reports. Like, it's just this.
You just go there and you say, like, Pam of God, please show me the report, and it just downloads into your head.
Yeah.
So they're asking in chat right now, if you have one person involved in all this that you could just walk up and have a free, you know, full-on punch in the face, who would it be?
Oh.
Ew,
I know who I have picked, but I want you guys to answer first.
I know that Stephen Avery's cousin, who started it all off,
Sandra Morris.
I would slap that cow so hard because she started all this with her lies, all exaggerations, and then
she started this ball rolling.
She started the whole ball rolling, and she's so spiteful, and she was so jealous. Yeah. He needs a weapon. Yep.
I don't know. I would say Kratz, but then I'd have to touch him and I'd get all sweaty.
You just hit him with the blow poke from the staircase.
Oh, I could throw an owl at him.
There you go.
On a staircase.
That's it.
Well,
he would just keep it and stuff it on, put it on his mantle or something. You know.
Obviously I would say Kratz, but I would get you to hit him, because then you'd get into trouble. But you're a lot bigger than me, so you do a better job of it.
So my answer,
girl, he might actually like it.
Yeah, that's funny. He might actually. But anyway, so my answer would obviously be Fassbender, because that's the guy who enrages me. However, I would really just want to walk up to him and just start questioning him about Brendan, and just listen and record his responses to my questions. That's really what I would want to do. But if I couldn't do that, then I'd settle for popping him in the nose. But
I mean, in fairness, Fassbender is, you know, he doesn't assess IQs because he's got a pretty low IQ himself, you know. He doesn't know which bits of Brendan's confession, you know, his exact words, you know, do I think that Brendan did all of it? You know, he doesn't know if did he do all of it? I don't know. Well, if you don't know that he did some of it, how do you know that he did any of it? Right. Absolutely. You know? So he's not exactly the sharpest tool in the shed, is he?
There's no strength in Manitowoc, as Erekose said before. There's no, you know, they're not going to set up a think tank in Manitowoc anytime soon.
Right.
That would involve thinking.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right.
Someone in the comments.
I'm sorry, just one thing real quick. Andy, I know exactly how you feel, buddy. That's why I answered the way I did. I would really rather ask Tom Fassbender questions than to hit him. But if I couldn't ask him the questions, then I certainly would want to pop him in the nose. But absolutely correct. We're not a violent bunch here on Erekose's channel. So just throw that disclaimer out. So.
Yeah. Silverback suggested Len Kaczynski.
Yes. Len's another one. I mean,
O'Kelly.
Especially O'Kelly, another one of the hated.
My daughter always says, if they ever make a purge, I know exactly who I'm going to get.
Oh, that's funny.
I would just pound Kaczynski with soft toys, and you know, until he's can't breathe, he's surrounded by them.
He'd probably like it.
I know.
He'd probably have his little cat toy. Meow, meow, meow.
Doing that.
Can like, honest to God though, like, I'm not following the trial, but what is wrong with a person who sits there with a cat toy?
Yeah, for 45 minutes.
That alone
can't
should
solve
be
that problem.
But that alone should be something that Nyrider and Drizzen can bring up, saying like, look at this man who was his legal representation during these times where he was confessing and whatnot, clearly has mental health issues.
Yeah, he has to.
And like, I don't know, hopefully they can use this cat thing as a, and in Mam 2 there, he had cat stuffed animal toys all over his couch and stuff. Right. And
I know
it and I don't want to say like, oh, mental health, like that it's bad. Like, we all struggle in a different way, but he was clearly working with diminished capacity, and it makes you wonder, like, the cases that he was working as a judge, shouldn't this be overlooked now as well?
Yeah,
or looked over. Sorry.
Yeah, and what he wasn't appropriate. He wasn't capable of handling those sort of cases. He needs care. He needs room with lots of padding, and where he can just sit in his pajamas all day and just sit soothing beverages and just have someone stroke him and go, Len, it's okay, you're okay. And maybe, 20 or 30 years of that. Yeah. And, not be around people that he can mess up, because he's not okay. He's definitely not okay. And he did mess up. He messed up big time.
Yeah. Oh, he certainly did. I think, personally, I think that what Len Kaczynski and O'Kelly did alone, that alone should have vacated Brendan's conviction. Personally, that's my feelings. And the fact that we're adding all of this controversy about his confession on top of that, to me, is the fact that he's still in prison is a travesty, and it's making a mockery of the state of Wisconsin in the world's eyes. And hopefully the state of Wisconsin is going to see that they are a mockery pretty soon. Because what is that other thing they were doing recently where they were going to try that 10-year-old girl as an adult, and not, instead of holding the responsible adults accountable, they were going to charge a 10-year-old as an adult and throw a 10-year-old child into prison.
You can't do that.
That's just
younger and younger and younger, and
it's Wisconsin. It's like, come on. But it's the people of Wisconsin have to wake up and say, you know what, are we cool with this? They have to have that aha moment and go, wait, this is our state. Are we good with this? The world's looking at us and kind of snickering and laughing at us. Are we good with this? How good are we with this? That conversation needs to take place amongst the citizens of Wisconsin, in my opinion.
From how they're depicted in the and people who've been to the rallies with them, how they're depicted in the documentary, it seems like the older generation seem to be very completely apathetic, or on the side of the law, and that Stephen's guilty, so therefore we feel like justice is done, end of story, that's fine. And it seems to be more the college age kids, 20s, maybe in the 30s, who are and I realize I'll put myself in the older category, but we won't talk about that. But the younger generation coming through are the ones standing up going, no, this isn't right. We don't want to be those sort of people. And so it's kind of got that generational issue where, unfortunately, it's probably the majority of people in the apathetic category that are just stuck in that mindset. And I unfortunately, that takes a long time for that sort of, for them to die, and for the younger ones to come through in the numbers that you need to generate the change, in voting and all of this sort of stuff. So it seems like it's could be a really long time coming.
Right.
I worry that sort of things, it's coming, but in time for Brendan and Stephen, I don't know.
Will there be enough time? Will Alan and Dolores get to see Stephen and or Brendan out of prison before they pass on? I mean, I was watching the documentary today and listening to Alan, choking up, saying that exact thing or expressing that exact thought. And it's like, it is sad. This thing, it's like I say, people, the criminal justice system, there are a lot of people affected by what happens in a courtroom, and it's not just the victims. So many people want to focus solely on the victims, but if you're not going after the right person, and not caring if you're going after the right person, then there is a higher percentage of victims on the defendant side as well. That really kind of, there's a lot of people's lives that get affected when people get prosecuted. And I think it's important that we make sure that we're going after the right people. I think the problem is with so many prosecutors is that they're worried about their numbers because they want to be seen as good prosecutors, and they know that more convictions will essentially prove that, so that they can move up the ladder. There possibly needs to be a shift in perception of how we perceive what a good prosecutor is. That, I think, is probably what really needs to happen, because right now the perception is if they get a lot of convictions, they're a good prosecutor. And I don't really necessarily agree that follows. So myself, anyway.
Yeah, actually, on that, I really we were going back talking about what are the differences in the legal system between the states and, say, somewhere like Australia. One of the key differences, and this I think would be the case in the UK, Paul, is that our government or our legal representatives aren't elected. They're not elected by a popular vote. They're awarded their positions. So that, I think that's a really key difference. So you don't run for a position of like we don't have a governor kind. I mean, we have prime ministers and those sorts of things, but to be like a DA, a district attorney, the equivalent of that in Australia, is not an elected position.
Mhm.
It's something you earn through.
Right. Earn it through merit.
Through merit. Thank you.
Yeah.
Through
Right.
merit, and I think that is illustrated by how people do their job. They're not just trying to go for votes and do what's popular. They're more
Right.
ideally trying to do what is right and in line with the law. So not to bag on the states, but just to illustrate that is a key difference. And I think something that unfortunately does is what a lot of people have unfortunately in judges in the back of their mind. Our judges aren't elected either. They're supported on merit. And so I think that's something that if that would change, that could have a huge difference, benefit on the jury.
It would, because I'm in Canada. The only thing that separates us is a fake line in the sand. And our criminal justice system is like a merit-based thing. We do not elect or have appointed judges and such the way you guys do, where or even prosecutors, they're not an elected official, so they're not working to be tough on crime that isn't an actual crime. They're not just trying to play the game of winning or losing because their job depends on it.
It's not a
and I think that's a big thing.
Yeah.
Like they get the job and that's their job. And if they don't see an actual crime that has occurred or whatever, they're okay to dismiss the charges because they're not going to get fired or voted out. Where in the States, it's, oh, they were too light on crime. This is an unsolved case. We can't have that. Like when you start seeing election years in the States and you start to see the prosecutions starting to close cases super fast, and it's usually high profile cases that have been open for the last however many years that they've been in, and then suddenly they've got a big break on the case and they make it into this huge deal, and it's so that is what people are remembering when they go to the polls.
Not politically driven. It's
well, that's my thing, and I'll use AEDPA as an example of why our criminal justice system is in the state that it's in. Because of what happened in Oklahoma City, and because of what one malcontent did. Okay, we as Americans got behind the Congress in making this AEDPA thing, and what it essentially did was to make ourselves feel safer, to make sure that Timothy McVeigh met his death in an electric chair or whatever it was, wherever he met his death, so that we could make sure that one person went to death. We have all sacrificed our habeas rights, all of us. That's what we gave up for some small, tiny little measure of security. That's what we did. That's how pathetic it is. That's exactly how pathetic it is. We are a pathetic bunch of freaking idiots right now because we allowed our leadership to sell us that line of crap. And the Supreme Court also has some blame in it because of the way they interpreted it. That they somehow feel that this interpretation is good for America moving forward is ridiculous to me. And then, sorry, go ahead, Marissa.
I was just gonna say that it seems like with the habeas and the AEDPA and all that, it was a fear-driven thing. It wasn't even necessarily based on a truth. And like, yes, terrorism is real, but domestic terrorism tends to be your biggest problem. I think as of November 28th, you guys had something like 380 shootings in the States, and most people have not heard of that. And there's barely that many days so far in the year. Like, or I guess 300, I think it was 320 maybe. But, and it's so mainstream. But then you add the word terrorist attack, whether it's a mass killing or not, and everyone is talking about it, and that allows AEDPA to be what it is, because everyone is so scared that the 16-year-old who may or may not have dismembered a body could get out and become this terrorist. And that's not how it should work. It should be, you are a proven terrorist, you are linked to ISIS, you are like, and that's who it should be affecting. It shouldn't be, you did this, you're considered a dangerous offender forever because of AEDPA.
It
wasn't it just supposed to apply to terrorism and death row cases?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Why? But they felt, I think the Supreme Court felt that in order to make this thing actually work, where these people won't be able to appeal, because they were just so eager to get Timothy McVeigh into the death chair, essentially, that they basically wanted to make sure nobody had any habeas rights. That way the courts couldn't get bogged down with people trying to petition for their habeas rights. And it's like, it's all was just this way so that they could streamline Timothy McVeigh, right? So that they could streamline him into the death penalty. And that's really all it was. It's such a small scope on this. It's not just applying to it's terrorists or people who are facing the death penalty. It's gone way beyond that, way beyond. And
I feel that it should never apply to a child, period. Because if there is a child who is involved in domestic terrorism or whatever you want to call it, that child clearly has issues that stem from something else. It just, I don't know, that child is capable of being rehabilitated, and if they're not capable of it, then it should apply. Like jail time or criminal psych facility, something along that line for their sentence, and then look at them and see if they're a rehabilitated individual, because they're kids. Kids do stupid things.
Yeah, certainly kids do.
Anyway, back from the current situation with AEDPA, or has it just gone too far? Or can the Supreme Court pull it back if they wanted to?
By denying Brendan's cert with all the momentum it had behind it? Yeah, I think they're pretty much married to it. I think they're good with where they're at, personally. I mean, look at the juggernaut that Brendan was, and they just went, ho-hum. You know? You know what I mean? We have to wake up our legislature here in America, and we're going to have to make our legislature deal with it, because obviously the Supreme Court sees no problem with the decision they made. And that's the way it appears to me anyway.
Yeah. And it
just
was
like to point out a couple of things.
Bipartisan majority too. I can't get my head around that. Like, it wasn't just Republicans or Democrats. It was just across the board.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know why the judges in the highest court of the land somehow thought stripping Americans of their habeas rights was the way to go. I don't know how they did that, but I really do wish they would rethink it.
Oh, Bill.
Just a couple of thoughts there. Yeah, we were on about whether judges to be appointed or elected, as you quite rightly pointed out. Here in the UK, judges are appointed, and I suppose the sort of the fear amongst some people would be, well, if you appoint them, you know, that's a system that's open to abuse, whereas if you elect them, you know, it's the majority of the population that want them, and you know, therefore the problem with judges being elected is their accountability. I would have to point out that here in the UK, the one criticism that we often level at our judges is actually the fact that they're not harsh enough. That is one of the biggest issues here in the UK, that we don't punish people severely enough. Certainly, as far as the UK is concerned, I feel that judges are often held accountable by, for example, the media and the press, for what they've done. The other thing I was going to mention was that one of the en banc dissenters used an excellent line, and it was the fact that AEDPA doesn't paralyze everything. It shouldn't be used to paralyze something. It's just an interpretation of the AEDPA, isn't it?
Mm-hmm. Well, yeah, it's their interpretation, right?
It's what's happened is because they've been allowed to in effect, for something to be wrong for such an amount of time, that it then becomes accepted as the norm, doesn't it?
Yeah.
In other words, we're going to keep getting it wrong because we've been getting it wrong in the past, and we're quite happy with getting it wrong. So we're going to continue to get it wrong. And they did. They missed it. They missed a great opportunity. I know you don't like me calling them scooters, but I'm going to keep calling them scooters. The Seventh Circus.
I'm good with the Seventh Circus
because
hey, I have my beef with the with SCOTUS right now too. I mean, I think with everything that was behind Brendan, all the momentum, support, 6 amicus briefs at the cert stage, which is kind of unheard of for somebody petitioning the Supreme Court. I mean, with all of that momentum, all that attention, all of that, just force behind Brendan, and they were just like, "Oh, ho hum, yeah, whatever." It's just like it's disheartening. It's a little depressing, and unfortunate.
I wouldn't get too disheartened. It was. Remember, I've shared that email that I got from Steve Drizzen, and I wrote to him just after SCOTUS declined to grant the writ of certiorari,
right.
and he said, look, Paul, I've been in this game so long now. You do have to realise that things do take time sometimes. But the opinions do change, and we touched on that earlier about the fact that opinions. You only need more and more of these cases of wrongful conviction being highlighted, which is what making a murder.
And dissenting opinions become majority opinions.
Exactly, but the point is that because of making a murderer, you've got something so powerful that the whole of the world is watching.
Yeah,
and you've got people like yourselves, Laura, Fresh Start Monday. I've sent you a few of the other guys. They're actually looking at these cases now, aren't they? You're not just looking at this case. You're looking at wrongful convictions in general, and this whole subject is becoming more and more important. And of course, opinions are going to change. Mm-hmm. People are gonna wise up, as they say over there, aren't they? They're gonna realise, there is something wrong with what's going on here.
Yeah, definitely.
So I wouldn't be too discouraged and disheartened.
Yeah, I'm like I said, like you're right. Dissenting Drizzen also says, Professor Drizzen also says that. In time, dissenting opinions become majority opinions. Yep. So sometimes it's just a patient game. And I know here in America, patience isn't really our forte. It's not really what Americans are really good at. But it's required here. I mean, all the class, all the tact, and all the patience are required here. And that's what Kathleen Zellner is going to keep doing here. You heard her say she won't darken the door of a federal court. And that's because of AEDPA. It's up to us as the citizens to start barking at our legislature and to start barking at our senators and that sort of stuff, and making changes. AEDPA needs amending. It went too far. It definitely went too far. Even the one who was championing it himself, Bill Clinton, says he did not intend for it to rob Americans of their habeas rights. That was something that the Supreme Court did, and when they interpreted it, and that is just a disturbing thing. So we need to figure out what in AEDPA caused the Supreme Court to interpret it in that way, so that that can be removed, and hopefully they can reinterpret.
I mean, things
And that actually,
repealed.
sorry, Paul.
No,
I was going to say that actually goes back to what we were talking about earlier with how the English language seems to be the biggest problem right now with these cases. It's like we're so used to speaking emoji that even these high up elected officials no longer comprehend what this legal Latin jargon actually means, and it shouldn't be that complex. Like, they really need to go back and they need to look, and like I mentioned the Bible the other night, and I know lots of people haven't read it, but it was originally in Greek and in Hebrew, and they've translated it, and the original translation is completely different than the current translation. And they did that in order to make it so that people who, as our language progressed, we would still be able to understand it.
Yeah.
Like, we don't talk with like thou shalt not anymore. That is not English anymore. And they need to do that with these laws that were made well over 100 years ago.
Yeah. Well,
or the words that they use to make the laws.
Right. And the last time they weighed in on juvenile confessions was what is it, 40 years ago now, I believe it is. It's time. I mean, it's time for them to address this, and they just missed a big opportunity. In my opinion, Brendan was a juggernaut that they just kind of went, eh.
You know, this sounds like a really great subject for a Stacey Seabrook song, protest song. It's time was actually the slogan for a political campaign to re-elect off Whitlam, one of our ex-prime ministers back in the 70s.
It's also an Imagine Dragons song that I love, actually.
And so I think an AEDPA Stacey Seabrook song could be educational, and if it could be catchy.
I think that's a really good idea, actually.
Awesome.
I think that's a stellar idea, actually. Yeah. Maybe I'll write up some lyrics for him and send it over.
Write up some lyrics. Yeah.
So, all right. Yeah, that's a good idea. I think I'll do that. I think we'll get with Stacey on that.
Yeah.
He'll probably watch this at some point and see us suggesting it. So,
yeah.
Maybe if you are co-writer, you won't get copyrighted.
Yeah. I'll tell you what, I have a new song, folks, that I'm going to be using on my channel now. It was sent to me by a gentleman named Jason Sinovic. He has it. The song is on YouTube. It's called Monster Wrongful Conviction. But he actually sent me a copy of his song so that I could use it in my own videos without triggering off his copyright stuff with iTunes and with YouTube. So he actually sent me a copy of it. So I'm going to probably start having Stacey do the same thing so that I can avoid that issue. So, but so it's and I'm going to be playing it at some point. Maybe I'll play it on the way out tonight for everybody, or I'll use it coming up in an upcoming premiere or something. But a cool song. It's called Monster Wrongful Conviction. If you search for that on YouTube, it'll probably pop up for you.
So the figure being touted as the compensation eventually for Stephen Avery is 100 million.
That'll be the number, but he won't get that. It'll be significantly less, but it'll still be a significant amount. But you know, but
well, Zellner gets something like in most states in America, it's 33.33%.
Yeah. So then she'll get about 33 million. So they'll get about what Stephen was asking for the first time.
and she'll get a third of that. So she'll get about 10 million.
Yeah.
You know, and it's only going to be a matter of time before. And I've seen people talking about this. The whole system is whereby, you know, you've got the state that can throw a load of money at convicting somebody wrongfully, and then you've got the you know, in some cases you've got people that can't afford to defend themselves, so you've got the attorneys, the defense attorneys, and then you've got the likes of Kathleen Zellner, who are the ones that
Travis says it hasn't been 33% for a long time, by the way.
Right.
That's what he
Has it
says.
gone up or down?
He says probably 45 to 50%.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking. Yeah.
So
yeah, and she'll be worth every penny of that.
oh yeah, she is.
You know.
She's absolutely.
Yep.
The real question is, how much money are they going to have to lose in order for there to actually be an investigation into what's going on and fix this?
That's a good question.
I've been going on about this for ages. There has to be some sort of, you know, inquiry into this, because the original inquiry, investigation by Leixelager was a complete sham. Obviously, you know, nobody was found to be to blame.
Right.
So this time around, there's gonna be a lot more scrutiny of what they find, and that's going to be most beneficial. For me, the big thing is, you know, you've got to have, after that, then you've got to have truth and reconciliation, and eventually, hopefully, these communities will, because I mean, when you've got Kim Ducat talking about the fact, Ducat, yeah, that, you know, Manitowoc will never recover from this, you know, that's worrying, isn't it? You know.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I mean, they're so scared, and rightly so, of some precedent, or people like Stephen Avery, who have been wrongfully convicted, coming out, suing in civil actions, and then people hold up Wisconsin or Manitowoc as a, you know, as an example of, well, if they got this much, well, we should get this much, and how many other times has this happened? And then it only spurs more people on to look into other cases, and for organisations in wrongful convictions to consider taking on other cases that might have merit, if there's the potential for civil action. And once they open that can of worms, you can't shut it. And so I think that's why they're holding on so tightly, and why the DA, whatever his name is, you know, fighting so hard to keep Brendan in jail and all these last minute appeals, because that's the can of worms that opens that, and then that could trigger Stephen Avery getting out, and then that triggers everything else potentially, you know, this domino effect, and their heads are on the chopping list, on the chopping block,
right?
You know. And no one wants to be the guy who let it happen.
Yeah.
They all want to retire and get their pension secured away before any of that happens. You know, if I was married to anyone in Manitowoc or those sort of counties, I'd be divorcing and getting my share before any of this blows up. Get it out of there, because, it's coming.
Yeah. So I agree. I mean, pretty much. Oh, looks like Laura's got her premiere coming up here. So, well, yeah, it's been interesting. Let's see if we got any other questions here in the chat real quick that we can address. The only person who can arrest the sheriff is the coroner. I know that's so awesome. Although it didn't seem to work out so well here.
I wonder what would have happened to her had she actually arrested the coroner.
Yeah, with two high-ranking county officials who ended up contacting her just about because she was interested in it, who ended up, you know, calling her and shushing her or shooing her away.
What if all she'd done is just contact the local news station and say, "Hey, I've got a story for you. Guess what they've threatened to do to me? You want to come over and cover this story?" you
Yeah,
know?
but she had to go out on calls. I mean, the reason why she ends up leaving the sheriff's department and stops being a coroner there is because she was feeling unsafe going out on calls at night with her fellow, associates. So
Yeah.
that's a problem. If you
It is.
feel that kind of fear from your own coworkers and you have a fear of what they're capable of, then I mean, yeah, could you really try to arrest anybody? Would it work out, or would you end up in a ditch or something a couple days,
Yeah.
So
Yeah. How much
and
power do you really have?
yeah, I mean, I don't know. I mean, for her to feel that afraid, she doesn't seem like the type of person that's like easily scared either. So for her to have felt that type of fear to me seems significant.
Yeah, I mean, the coroner being denied, at least they were able to satisfy that bit of the conflict of interest in Manitowoc. And to me, the fact that you had these Manitowoc County officers searching all this number of times, like I said right at the start, Ken Kratz didn't prove that Stephen was guilty beyond all doubt. He didn't even prove it beyond reasonable doubt, and this is what we're finding now, isn't it? That and for me, that conflict of interest just being completely ignored, and people that think that Stephen Avery is guilty are questioning us as to why are you questioning this case? Come on, get real. Just because. And apparently there's some loophole whereby they were allowed to use those officers, but Crackerjack, Lincoln, Colburn, the two that were deposed, as again mentioned in the book, Andy Colburn was very fearful that he was going to be, because he was the lowest ranking officer in to be deposed, that he was going to be the one that was going to be picked on.
Right.
He was going to be the one that was going to get thrown under thrown to the wolves. He was definitely looking at, big trouble.
Yeah. That sounds like a very real fear.
Yeah.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Was he ordered to write that report to actually make him look bad?
Yeah. It could be.
Certainly that report being 8 years late from him, that the sheriff then puts in the safe. No wonder he was quite happy to see Steve get framed.
Hold on, I'm trying to see. I'm trying to see if Stacey will come on.
All right.
I think with the coroner that it's really kind of a sad thing that she did not do, like Karen said.
That she didn't at least try?
And come forward and say something way sooner, because women in the workplace and women in general, and even some men, are pushed around and threatened like that all the time. And 13 years ago, when that happened, if she would have been willing to lose her job because of the case, which she clearly was, then she quit. Mm-hmm. If she would have just came forward and said, look, I'm quitting because they're doing this and whatever, at that time, it would have raised questions and it would have been a voice for other people in that same position.
Yeah, I totally agree. That's what frustrates me when we see her in MAM2 in tears saying, oh, I wish I could have done more, or I'm so this and that. And yeah, I think she feels guilty that she didn't do more, but don't be upset. I am so angry with her in a way, because don't cry about it now. You should have done something at the time.
Right.
Because I feel like, okay, you are upset with yourself because you didn't do it now, and that is fair enough. But don't come on the documentary trying to make yourself out as a victim, because you made a choice, and maybe it was the right choice for you at the time to protect yourself, and you did feel threatened, but you can't have it both ways. You can't say, I walked away because I was scared. and now come on and say, I'm such a victim. You made that choice, own it. But had she been stronger and able to say, yeah, these guys are doing this, and say it to somebody who had a voice, if she didn't feel she had a voice, tell someone who did. What situation or what landscape might we be in now? Maybe Stephen Avery might have had more support at the time, or maybe people wouldn't have bought the lies of Ken Kratz. Maybe the jury would have gone in with a slightly different attitude. You know, who knows?
Could be.
You know, they might have seen a little bit of that corruption already, had a hint of it. You know, she could have enacted change.
And even when like she went in and she did her thing in court and the jury wasn't allowed to see it, if she would have walked out of the courtroom and then said, this is what's going on, I'm quitting as of right now, because of this, the jury will not know, and all of that, it would have just exposed it. Like, she had many, many opportunities. And I do not want to victim shame, because clearly she was a victim and we don't even know what they threatened her with. Like, maybe they said you're going to end up like Teresa. I don't know. But
and what happened to the jury? That's what everybody in the live chat's talking about right now, and is like, what happened with the jury too? What happened there? It was 7-2, and then with a couple undecideds, and then suddenly it just flips the other way. Like, woo, you know, like, how did that happen? And you know, why is Poggle having any contact in any way with the jury whatsoever? Why is he ushering them places? Why? I mean, it's just bothersome. Just totally. So many things about this whole thing that just make you just go, what the hell?
Some people are afraid of something, and it's obviously big enough that they're keeping quiet. And they've kept quiet for a really long time, except for the juror who had to leave because of his family emergency, and apparently one other juror who I think is still unknown, but who has confirmed that they were leaning towards him being not guilty at the early stages. They have confirmed his story on that. I mean, no one else has come forward and stood up and said, yeah, this is how it was, and said what has happened in between that and the verdict. So there's obviously something keeping them from doing that. Even anonymously, people aren't willing to give all of the details. So what could be the possible threat, and from whom, and to be going on for this long? How is that possible that nobody has been? That drives me crazy.
You heard G-Man Moore say it, that it's just in the culture there. The judges have gotten to the point where they're willing to allow a lot of this stuff to happen, so they allow the DAs to do it. When the DAs know what they can get away with, then they pass that on to the law enforcement and let the law enforcement know what they can get away with. And it's just a snowball that rolls downhill. And, you know, that was one of the things Steve Moore said that I found was very interesting. How he put it, the kids are running the show in that area of Wisconsin. I thought that was interesting way of putting it.
Did you read all of Farrick's book, or did you not get through it all yet?
Not done. After we're done here, I'm going to be finishing reading it. But I just got into the part where he's talking about Scott Tadych and his past and that sort of stuff. I'm making notes as I go, so it's taking me a little longer.
I know it's been taking me so long, and I've only got the Kindle version, so it's hard. I don't want to give myself a migraine from the eye strain.
Right.
So I've been trying to highlight and take notes, but he goes into so much of like the background and the random communication between everybody and the links, like Ricky and Carmen, and like he touches on it all. And I strongly recommend the book to anybody who doesn't believe that corruption exists.
He's been reporting on all those things, so yeah.
Yeah, like Falcon. needs to read this book. And I'm not saying that because Falcon is a guilter. I'm saying it because Falcon struggles to believe that corruption is happening or has happened. And the book just highlights it, but does it in a way that provides you with the documentation. It's not just a story, it's the documents, like with the narrative around it. And it's just so important. Like I highly recommend it to anybody. It's not the, like, I will agree, it's not the best literary work, but it is very much worth the read just to see all of my pets are bugging me.
He writes like a
just to
newspaper
see-
guy, that's for sure.
Yeah, it's just, but the way he inserts things, like he gives you a little bit of a story on Carmen, and then he talks about the bones and how the processing of the bones occurs, like just little things that we've all thought about, but he's put it into like a chronological type of order, so it's not on page 100 and page 700, it's all in one chapter.
Right.
Yeah, I think that's some of the skeptics need. My copy's still in the air. It should be here, so I'll read it over the holidays. But the skeptics need that sort of stuff because the skeptics, and by the skeptics I don't mean conspiracy theorists, I mean real skeptics who critical thinking to assess things, but they tend to be very black and white. If something is clearly evidence-based, great. Science-based, excellent. It's either that or it's a conspiracy theory. There's like UFO and that sort of stuff, lizard people. There's nothing in the middle. And this is in some ways in the middle because whilst for us we see things as there's evidence, like the evidence was planted, we didn't see it planted, so we can't point to a video or an actual tangible piece of evidence.
But I have a smoking gun.
Yeah, there's a smoking gun, but we can use logical deduction to say this means that, the blood couldn't have been put there this way because, well, Zellner's experiments show that, and you can replicate that, but you can't replicate how the state said it happened. So that's logical, and that makes sense. But the skeptics won't accept that. They think, oh, that's a justification, that's a this and that. And so, but that sort of book, if he's pulled together documentation and all that sort of stuff, then they're like, oh, show me the evidence. Like Falcon does, show me the evidence. But they're like, oh, no, I don't agree that that's evidence. So
Falcon,
I think that was,
Falcon reserves the right to be able to explain it. That's what and
I actually respect Falcon as a guilter because he is also wanting to learn, and that's why I use him as an example, because he wants to learn. He's saying to us, prove that there's corruption, and a book like John Ferrick's is a very great place to start to see that there, like, it's got the proof. It's legal documents
of corruption.
That's what I'm saying. That's exactly sounds like the sort of thing. Anyone who's like, show me the pieces and how it connects. Also, I haven't seen the book. It sounds like that's exactly the sort of thing. Whereas maybe other narrative-based books wouldn't really satisfy that sort of person. So this is the sort of book that I would give to a skeptic to say, well, here is something a bit more concrete. You want to connect some dots, have at it. So that sounds really good. And because that's a problem we certainly have here, and I see in the online communities, people are just they're almost scared to be labelled. I think 9/11 and the truther movement did a lot of damage to the skeptical movement. They're so scared of being labelled a 9/11 truther. But I'm a skeptic, and there were some questions I had about 9/11 that I've since been, had answered, but there's still some things I'm not sure about. And I think it's okay to kind of be in the middle. You don't have to go, I have all the, it's actually more purely skeptic to kind of go, I don't have all the answers to this, but show me some evidence. And that makes sense. And then
well, it's like
the-
you were talking about flat.
is you have to, when you see evidence that shows you a different perspective and going with it, that's actually what being skeptical is, being willing to change your mind when you see contradicting evidence to your, you know, not being rigid in your worldview.
Right.
And so
It's like you were saying about being a flat, like the flat earthers. My son, he says to me one day, he goes, "Mom, the earth is flat. Dig a hole and fall off."
well, you can come here and visit me then. How good are the coordinates?
It's so true. Like, okay, if the earth is flat, how come we can drill and not it's not a piece of paper. If I poke a hole in a piece of paper, I see through it. I don't see through the earth. Like, how thick is this earth that's flat? Oh, okay, so it's so flat that it turned into a ball. Gotcha.
Well, someone said, the earth's flat. How come the cats haven't knocked everything off the edge by now? Isn't that right, baby? Yes.
Oh, Jesus. Purple's in the chat now, guys. She's admiring Marissa's rack. Let's see.
Thanks, Laura.
They're
100% my own.
Let's see. Oh my God! Now everybody's talking about those. Everybody's talking about those now. Let's see. What do we got here? How about 18 years in prison of an innocent man? Oh yeah, Stephen Avery did that already. Yeah, we talked about that. We've been talking about that. Let's see. Somebody says, I've seen Falcon on the show, and he does have the balls enough to stand on his convictions. I just wish he had a bit more I wish he was a bit more educated on all the facts. And I would say that Falcon is educating himself. He certainly is. He's digging into the documents. He's willing to read John Frack's book. I know he's willing to. He may not get to it right away, but I know he's willing to. So
he's got the right attitude, I think.
Yeah.
He just needs to kind of direct his mind. But, you know, if he gets there, he gets there. But he's got the right attitude. And that's all we can ask, I think.
And it's possible that he can still think that they're both guilty, and I still will be nice to him, and I still won't hold it against him. But I think maybe he's starting to see the merits with Brendan. I think he's coming around on Brendan.
Well, it's interesting, isn't it, that Robert Herman tried to convince people by suggesting, listen to Dan O'Donnell, you know, that I should check out his articles. Mind, I sent you one of Dan O'Donnell's more recent ones where he actually talks about the control question. But the point was that when I asked Sheriff Herman if anybody had actually changed their mind as a result of you know, reading and hearing Dan O'Donnell, he said, "Oh yeah, one lady had changed their mind. In fact, she'd somebody that had signed a petition to say that you know, that the petition that's sent to Obama to overturn the conviction." To which I couldn't resist it. I said, "Well, it's nice to know that Mrs. Herman is now on your side."
I do love that joke, Paul. I do love that joke.
It's true. That's exactly what I said to him. You know, and not Mrs. Herman as in wife Herman, but his mum.
Right.
He's not married. He's not married.
Oh, I see.
He's not married.
So you're talking about his mummy?
Yeah, his mum plays the accordion. How do I
really?
Because he told me that. He told me that. Yeah.
That's funny.
It's funny because you know, as far as ultimate guilters are concerned, Robert Herman is an ultimate guilter. You know, he believes Stephen and Brendan are guilty, or at least he wants to make out that they're guilty, more so than anybody. But it's all down to this image, isn't it? You know, of wanting to be seen as if you know, Manitowoc is this ideal place where you know, if we've got a problem, we sort it out. We're good. We're great. And unfortunately, making a murderer has completely busted that idea. Now, I do get the fact that for the people of Manitowoc, it's not very edifying to see their town being painted so badly. You know, this is one of the things that you know, Erekose, Charlie Bones has mentioned on more than one occasion. You know, that making a murderer has made not just, you know, not just Manitowoc, it's made Wisconsin look bad. It's a big problem.
You should reach out to Mr. Behrens and see if he'll come on and hang out with us and talk about that particular topic with us.
Well, I've mentioned.
You can tell him it'll just be me and you, so he can trust us because he knows that we won't attack him, and you know. Yeah,
I've actually sent him stuff to try and bring him up to speed on the case, and he actually asked me if I'd, you know, about making a murderer too, and what did I think about it, you know, and I just said, look, it's just further damning. It's really damning for the sheriff's department there, and everybody involved in it. It's so clear the corruption that's gone on. You know that. It's going to be a case of when Kathleen Zellner gets her evidentiary hearing, and then all of the evidence that was used against Steve is all proven to be completely false. There's not even going to be a need for a trial, because the state are just going to say, look, we've had a big enough kicking over this. It's time to cut our losses. Yeah. Like I said, I'm waiting for the state of Wisconsin to go, are we tired of being like laughingstock of the world yet? Are we done with the world looking at us and criticizing our cops and our everything? Do we want to just like deal with this? You know, I'm waiting. I mean, that conversation just needs to take place in Wisconsin at this point, I think. And whether or not they're close enough to there yet, or whether that day is coming sooner or later, is obviously anybody's guess. But it does seem to me that a lot of the Wisconsin, you know, residents are at least considering it. I see a lot of them on Facebook. I see a lot of them on here. I see, you know, a lot of them on, you know, Twitter and stuff. So, I mean, is it everybody yet? No, not yet. But maybe it's getting there. Karen's back. I was wondering where she went. Listen, I better say cheerio, and we'll catch you again sometime soon. Okay.
I thought you'd say Captain Crunch when you leave.
See you later, Mr. Capaldi. It's been great having you. It's been great having you, Haber, here as the Mad Scotsman.
I'll leave my picture there for a few minutes for you.
Have a good night.
Cheers, and I think with that, we'll start winding it down. We'll say goodbye to my lovely guests here, Karen Gainey and the lovely Marissa Slusarek. I think, or Slusarczyk, I said, right? Anyways, we'll get back into this. We'll get to the pronunciation of that eventually. The pronunciation of that eventually, I guess. Anyways, but it's been great having you guys, and glad you came on for the international show. Thank you very much.
Thanks for having us.
Oh, absolutely. It's been a pleasure. You guys are also very smart about the case, and you can, you know, I love that this international show here, we're able to support how well-informed people around the world, not just here in the United States, are getting on this case. And that's something you guys show. That's something that Paul shows. That's something my buddy Mark Hodnott, who couldn't make it, shows that there are people outside of the U.S. who find this to be outrageous and have taken that interest. And I think that's stellar, and love the opportunity tonight for you guys to come on so I can showcase it to everybody else. So thank you for being here.
Yay.
So I think what we're going to do now to go on the way out, I think I'm going to play another Stacey Seabrook song. Oh, actually, no, I think I'm going to play Monster Wrongful Conviction. That's the other new one. Sorry.
Everybody here, after, go over and watch Laura's premiere. She premiered it already, but it's part 2 of her major bombshell from last night.
Yes.
Yeah.
So
everybody go over and check that out. Yes, everybody go check that out after we're done here. This song's going to play for a couple minutes. Hopefully you stick around for at least some of it and listen to a little bit of it. But it'll play for 2 or 3 minutes, and this is on the way out. Thank you, everybody, for showing up. It's been great having you here. Everybody in the live chat, great stuff tonight, great questions, great interest. And so let's go ahead and get into the final song.
Throw a snag on the Barbie.
Through another snake? Another
Throw
snake?
another snag or shrimp
snag.
on the Barbie.
Yeah, that's why we say throw another shrimp on the Barbie here in America.
Yeah, that's what we do here. You know it. Or grab some coffee.
Yeah.
Waiting.
Coffee.
Coffee. Have a cup of coffee.
I had coffee, vodka, and water.
You guys say something? You guys asking a question? No? Okay.
Nope.
Okay.
Told you the truth, set me free. No, 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 not me. You were a bad boy, you're gonna do your time. You know it wasn't good enough. Jail time, I think you find your hands too long. You're closer to 30. To me, I would give you more than 30. How do you think now? Get from this. You're gonna have to get it when you're all dried up. We're gonna feel better if the system's at fault. You can always send a letter. Help! I must be in a bad dream. Now you can see what I mean. Help, 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 help me. I've been in this trap for so long. How can you let the monster go on? Don't forget me another day. In the end, we all have to pay.
Free me! Certainly the cry of any wrongfully convicted person, to be certain. So that is the song that was telling you guys about earlier. It will be getting featured here on my channel a bit. Obviously Stacey Seabrook's still going to be here most of the time. I only have one song from Jason, so still Stacey's going to be a big part of this, but that song is powerful. And if you guys watch the video, the imagery that goes along with it is also very powerful. So I suggest everybody go over and check that out. I'll try and make sure I leave the link below here in a few minutes. I'll make sure it's in the info for you guys when I go offline here. And if there's anything that my two lovely guests here would like to say before we go. No?
Aussie.
Sorry?
Aussie.
Oh, okay.
That's it. No.
So we have Karen Gainey from Australia, Marissa Cesarsik from Canada. Obviously, we had Paul Capaldi, the Mad Scotsman from over there in Scotland. And I hope we had an enjoyable time here talking about the case tonight, guys. I hope you enjoyed it. Hope you liked the music. And that's about it for tonight. If you haven't already, please hit subscribe. We'll see ya.
And hit the like button.
And hit like. Yes, hit like. There you go.